I am Carmen Reese, 52 Devon Street, Town Moderator. I see that there is a sufficient number of voters present to permit us to open the meeting, many of whom are still looking for a seat. Please do find one, and I do so declare. The meeting is called pursuant to a warrant signed by the Select Board on January 14, 2019. I have inspected the return of service on the warrant and find it to be in order. I declare that the meeting is properly called. We're very grateful to Superintendent Hunter, Principal Mastrullo, the Regional School Committee, and the faculty, students, and staff of the high school for accommodating us here this evening, assisting us with preparation for the meeting, and bearing with us in the disruption that we cause. This evening, the gymnasium is the venue for the meeting, and voting will take place only in the gymnasium unless it proves necessary to open the auditorium for overflow. The broadcast of the meeting on the Minuteman Media Network will be available in the cafeteria for those who wish to follow along from there, but no voting will take place in the cafeteria at any time. The meeting also will be broadcast live on our high school's radio station, WIQH. This evening, for the first time, we will be accepting questions and comments by email from Concord voters watching the proceedings at home, and time permitting, sharing them with the meeting. The email address to use will appear for folks on the bottom of the television screen, and the town clerk staff and volunteers will be verifying voter registration of email senders. Speakers in the hall will still have priority over those sending email questions and comments. I would like now to invite Fire Chief Tom Judge to come to the podium to tell us what we need to know in the unlikely event of an emergency this evening. Chief Judge.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Just a couple of quick safety announcements, folks. The auditorium has exits in all four corners. To your right, there is one behind that screen. If you look at where the dual county banner is, your front right, there is an exit there if needed. Folks who have kids in the child care, in the event that we have to evacuate the building, please do not go to the child care to retrieve your children. The staff in there will bring them out to the courtyard outside of the cafeteria. And that is all I have. The aisles are, I ask you to keep the aisles open, and thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for that safety briefing and for everything that you and your department do for Concord. I'd also like to thank Chief O'Connor and the officers of the Concord Police Department who are here to protect and serve us this evening and every day. Mr. McCain nominates Ms. Carolyn Flood of 1289 Main Street to serve as the deputy moderator, who will carry out the duties of the moderator if she is unable to serve, and Mr. Stephen Ing of 12 Dalton Road as assistant moderator, who will carry out the duties of the deputy moderator if she is unable to serve. Is there a second? I see that there is. Are we ready for a vote? All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you very much. The meeting has elected Ms. Flood as deputy moderator and Mr. Ing as assistant moderator, and I do so declare. There are a variety of materials pertaining to tonight's meeting available on the tables in the cafeteria. Many of the motions this evening will be moved as printed in handouts, so please be sure to pick up the handouts that are out there that will tell you what the motions are. All of those materials are also available on the town website, www.concordma.gov, under the Town Meeting tab. There is Wi-Fi available here in the gymnasium and in the cafeteria to provide you with internet access, and no password will be required. If you pick up nothing else, pick up the Finance Committee report. The first 58 pages will tell you everything you need to know about town finances, including the budgeting process, debt management, and a 5-year projection on property taxes. It also contains all of the warrant articles and the recommendations of the Finance Committee and the Select Board on the articles. This report has won many statewide awards, and we owe our thanks to the Finance Committee, Finance Director Carrie Lafleur, and to her staff for another excellent report. The good order and the control of fiscal affairs that you see presented in the Finance Committee report are the main reason that Concord remains one of the few communities in Massachusetts that enjoys a AAA bond rating. And for that, we owe our thanks not only to the Finance Director and the Finance Committee, but also to our town manager and his staff, our Select Board, and our Superintendent of Schools, and our local and regional school committees. Thank you. The green booklet, which is entitled Town Meeting Traditions and Procedures, is a useful guide to this evening's proceedings. I invite you to pick up a copy. If you do have questions about town meeting procedure, including especially how one might make an amendment or a particular type of motion, we have this evening a town meeting procedure resource person. She is Dr. Susan Curtin of 169 Holdenwood Road. She's available for consultation on process issues and for assistance with the drafting and presenting of motions and amendments. And I'm going to ask Dr. Curtin if she'll stand up and wave. She's seated here in the front row, and she's wearing a conveniently easy-to-see color if you are looking for her. Thank you, Dr. Curtin, for serving in that capacity. Do you have your voting slip? I don't. No voting slip. If you are a resident of Concord who is registered to vote, you should have received a voting slip that's this color tonight, kind of a close match for Dr. Curtin's jacket. When you checked in, you will want to keep this handy so that you are able to raise it for a vote by a show of hands or in a standing counted vote. Your voting slip is what identifies you as a person entitled to vote here at town meeting. Writing your name on the top of it at the printed part, not on the secret ballot part, is probably a good idea so you don't confuse it with other people's voting slips. If you are a resident of Concord who is not registered to vote or a visitor to tonight's meeting, you should have checked in as a visitor in the cafeteria, and you should have a visitor badge, and you should be sitting in the visitors section, which is located in the right rear. It is marked in the bleachers. And we welcome you as observers to our town meeting. I have appointed Mr. Abe Fisher of 400 Hayward Mill Road to be head teller, and Mr. David Carr of 82 Lawsbrook Road to be ballot supervisor, and Ms. Cynthia Rainey of 80 Hunters Ridge Road as assistant ballot supervisor. Mr. Fisher will be supervising vote counting on the floor in the event of a standing counted vote, and Mr. Carr will be supervising the ballot counting procedure and vote certification in the event that the meeting votes for a paper ballot on a motion. Mr. Fisher, are the tellers ready to be sworn? We are. Mr. Carr, where are you? There you are. Okay. Mr. Carr, are the ballot counters ready to be sworn? We are. Tellers and ballot counters, would you please stand and raise your right hands? Look at all those wonderful volunteers. Do you swear to carry out each of you swear to carry out faithfully and impartially your respective duties at this town meeting? Thank you all. You may be seated. On behalf of the meeting, I thank Mr. Fisher, Mr. Carr, Ms. Rainey, and each of the tellers and ballot counters for taking on this vital town meeting function. If we do call upon you to vote, don't forget to count your own votes. We also owe our appreciation to the team of people who have made it possible for us to hold this town meeting. The list of people is too long to name them all individually, but they include our facilities department, who I understand have been here at the high school since 6:30 or 7 o'clock this morning setting up, our CPR and first aid certified child care sitters, the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts who are here this evening carrying out our flag ceremony, our town clerk, Kari Tari, and her able staff, our town manager, Chris Whalen, and his dedicated staff, and including especially Heather Butler, I don't know where she is, but including especially Heather Butler, who is our town meeting coordinator, without whom we most certainly could not have organized this town meeting. So thank you very much, Heather. The excellent and professional staff of Minuteman Media Network, the experts from Boston Light and Sound, and Ms. Stephanie Farrell, who will tirelessly transcribe the proceedings this evening for closed captioning you see on the screens here. I want also to mark the passing this year of Ms. Laurel Landry. Laurel served us brilliantly as town meeting coordinator and administrative assistant to the town manager for many, many years. And her friends and admirers are too many to count. I thank her one more time and note that she will be very much missed. I now call on Junior Girl Scouts Lily Woodman and Kate Vouse, and Boy Scouts Ben Spragg and Freddie McWilliam to bring the flags forward. And would you all please stand while the flags are brought forward and remain standing? Thank you, Scouts. One of my favorite moments of town meeting is the flags being brought in by our Scouts. Before we begin the business of this annual town meeting, as has long been our custom, let us stand and hold a moment of silence. As we start our proceedings, let me share with you some thoughts on town meeting from the handbook we follow, Town Meeting Time. The town meeting conception of democracy is an idealized way of expressing the democratic hope that those who are governed will be able to reach those who govern them, that they will be able to make their voices heard where it counts. It speaks for the belief that a society is safer and freer when the bulk of its citizens understand the programs and goals that their government has chosen. And they have achieved this understanding because these programs and goals have been honestly debated in public. Not least, the town meeting ideal catches an important meaning of freedom and expresses a classic conviction of believers in democracy. That freedom in the concrete, freedom as it is experienced in daily life, is the experience of having a hand in the determining of issues that touch the individual closely and intimately. Tonight, we are Concord's legislature. Because we are here not only as private citizens, but also as legislators, we must bear in mind as we cast our votes not only our personal interests, but also those of our community as a whole. As we deliberate, let each of us here tonight maintain an open mind, an open heart, graciousness when we disagree, and a healthy sense of humor, so that the debates of this meeting will not become a source of division among us when our business here is finished. Thank you, and please be seated. The minutes of the meeting tonight will be kept by the town clerk, Kari Tari, who is sitting here to my right. Our select board is seated here on the left next to the podium. Our school committee is at the next table past the select board, and our finance committee is seated on the right side. My right, that is, your left. I'd like to note that the members of these boards and committees are all volunteers, and that they all find a great deal of personal reward, not to mention many television appearance opportunities in their service to our town. If you too would like to reap these enormous rewards, do important and interesting work, get to know your community better, you could fill out a green card. They're out on the table in the hall. You can find one of these online at the town website also. And you can volunteer for one of our many boards or committees. We produce a lot of paper here in Concord, and I feel like I'm having a pretty good show and tell time. This is the town report. This is a great document. It tells you so much about all the work of our boards and committees in town, and I really recommend it to you, if for no other reason than to figure out where you might best be able to volunteer your own time and talent. There's 40 or more committees and boards whose work is detailed in the town report. Mr. McCain moves that the reading of the warrant and the return of service thereon be omitted. Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor, raise their ballots. Thank you. All those opposed, raise their ballots. I see that the motion carries by a very large majority, if not unanimously, and I declare that it is a vote. I want to recognize this evening that we have town council here with us, Mina Macarius. He's here in our front row. Mina is intimately familiar with all of the issues that our meeting will be wrestling with over the next couple of days, and he is here to answer any questions that we may have of a legal nature on the business before us. It's the hope and goal of the moderator to conclude this 2019 annual town meeting by the end of Wednesday night. We have 46 articles on the annual town meeting warrant. No motion is expected on 2 articles, and 16 articles are on the consent calendar. That leaves us with 28 articles to address. And please note that tomorrow night, we have pre-scheduled Articles 23 through 26. Those are the affordable housing funding articles, to be the first business that the meeting will take up when we begin. Also scheduled for tomorrow night is a pilot demonstration of an electronic voting system. You'll find a handout explaining the e-voting demonstration on the tables in the cafeteria. And the reason to think about e-voting is to make town meeting more efficient, which may in turn increase participation and reduce cost by shortening the meeting. Electronic clickers, this is how the demonstration will work tomorrow night. Electronic clickers will be distributed at check-in. Voters not wishing to participate will have a special seating section located to my right, probably the first 8 rows, where only paper voting slips will be used. We'll have 2 practice votes on hypothetical questions, and then a motion will be made to use the clickers during the evening only for votes that would require a standing count and for those requiring a 2/3 quantum for passage. The meeting will then decide what it wishes to do with respect to using the clickers. And I do hope that everyone will complete the questionnaire that we'll have available tomorrow night and Wednesday night and Thursday, if we continue until then, to help us with questions we have about how we can best serve you in running town meeting. Before we take up Article 1, I believe that Deputy Town Manager Kate Hodges would like to address the meeting.
Good evening. This evening is bittersweet. Although we are saddened by the news of Chris Whalen's upcoming retirement, we should be happy that he may finally get the opportunity to improve his golf game, sleep past 7 a.m., and watch Monday night football games that have not been pre-recorded. Sitting down to write what I plan to say here today was one of the hardest tasks I've had to complete in a very long time. How can I capture the quality of a great leader in 5 minutes? It was then that I began to think about my personal experiences with Chris, how he's been a mentor to me and so many others of the senior management team. In many ways, I don't believe that I truly understood what it took to be a successful leader until I had the ability to work as Chris's number 2. Starting in Concord around 2015's town meeting prep afforded me the opportunity to see how Chris interacted and really educated citizens regarding town decisions and our needs. It quickly became clear to me that Chris was not only universally loved, but he was admired by members of the community, by the select board, and most obviously by the employees. Until that point, in my mind, great leaders of history were those who had some type of over-the-top bravado or who were often the focal point in a room or in a meeting, and I was so wrong. Chris's success comes from the way he listens to people. Each person who talks to him has his complete, undivided attention. He looks people in the eye, he tells them the truth, often apologizing for his overly blunt way of saying things. It's just remarkable. People blossom in Chris's presence and under his tutelage because he's deeply respectful of people's opinions, of their perspectives, of their points of view. It was soon after observing Chris at the very first town meeting that I realized what true leadership is. I believe that over the years, Chris has likely had that effect on many people. The secret to leading is to be able to articulate a common goal which works to inspire a diverse group of people to work hard together. There are nearly 600 employees who work in some capacity or another for the town of Concord. While many have not had the opportunity to work for Chris directly, I believe the employees of Concord would say that his vision and goals were always universally understood and respected. The staff trusts him. We trust in his vision, and I trust in his leadership. Concord employees are some of the most hardworking and skilled in the business, and that is the top-down, lead-by-example way of Chris. What's so unique about Chris's management style is his complete lack of arrogance, pretentiousness, or posturing. He trusts his team. He trusts us. He empowers us to make decisions that shape our department, and although we know we'll be held accountable in the end, good or bad, he doesn't intimidate us into submission. He believes the best way to keep an organization on course and successful is to give the other leaders all the responsibilities that they can handle and then stand back and let us work. That's not to say that he's hands-off in any way, but that he truly fosters an atmosphere of teamwork, accountability, and pride. Captain Michael Abersoff, commander of the USS Benfold, once said, "Trust is a human marvel. It not only sustains a social contract, it's the growth hormone that turns green soldiers into seasoned shipmates and troubled companies into dynamic competitors." As a once green manager, new in Concord, Chris's leadership and guidance helped me to personally develop my skills and my style. And I can speak for the other members of the senior management team when I say that as a whole, we feel empowered. We feel lucky. But Chris's legacy is more than what kind of boss he is. As town manager, being the boss is only half the job, and after 26 years as Concord's town manager and more than 3.5 decades in local government, Chris has truly solidified his role as an institution, both in the field and in town. Many of you sitting here or watching on television have likely had an opportunity to meet or speak with Chris throughout his tenure. Some may even have had the occasion to work with him on a committee or a project. I suspect that if we asked citizens about their experiences with our town manager, we would hear that Chris was someone who was approachable, responsive, and reasonable. We would hear a resounding agreement that Chris is everything a community would want in the town manager. We would hear that he cares deeply about Concord and that his years here have been an example of what government should be: open, responsive, transparent, and honest. And that is because Chris truly understands the role of any chief executive, that it's a very personal one. It requires a deep commitment to the community and to its citizens, often at the expense of one's personal needs or wants. It's a service or a sacrifice. It's missing his family's dinners or his girls' soccer games. It's giving back his weekends and his nights and his much needed leisure time. And it's because he believes the common good is trumped his individual needs. Chris's ability to handle all the personalities, emotions, and agendas within the town like ours is second to none. Each and every decision he makes is made by balancing internal and external factors with Concord's best interests at heart, carefully weighing competing interests and resident needs with financial responsibility has always been one of the great pillars of Chris's governance. When someone thoroughly exhausts an experience, they can't help but revere it. Over the last few years, I've had many conversations with Chris about his experiences, trying to soak up every bit of knowledge and advice that I can while he's still in office. Here's what I know. Chris loves Concord. He loves being your town manager. And when he speaks about any particular success, he always, and I mean always, gives the accolades to another person. Peyton Manning, when asked at his retirement press conference about his renowned career, said, "You can have all the swagger of a winner, but never be convinced that your greatest accomplishments are made alone." I believe Manning stole that line from Chris, which is reason number 5,489 why he will never be considered the greatest quarterback of all time. I don't think we'll ever have to wonder if Chris will miss the job. I believe that he absolutely will, eventually. The term legacy is overworked these days, but I have to say that when it comes to Chris, the term is more than justified. So Chris, on behalf of the members of your team, both past and present, we want you to know that your contributions are irreplaceable. Your dedication is immeasurable. Your guidance and leadership have been invaluable, and your absence is simply unacceptable. Congratulations.
I actually was on the search committee that selected Chris back in the early 1990s. So I've known him for his entire tenure here with the town. And one of the things I really learned working with Chris is that it's such a long way from a good idea to realizing that good idea. I actually was on the search committee that selected Chris back in the early 1990s. So I've known him for his entire tenure here with the town. And one of the things I really learned working with Chris is that it's such a long way from a good idea to realizing that good idea. Some people think that after the town meeting vote is over, it'll just get done. But somebody has to make it happen. My husband and I have this analogy we sometimes use with life, which is you can appear to be smoothly sailing across a lake like a duck, but you're really paddling pretty quickly under the water and nobody notices all the hard work. I sometimes think, that Chris can make it look really easy, but he brings a lot of skills to making those projects come to fruition.
This is an honor to Chris Whalen, and it's an honor for me to speak about Chris Whalen as our town manager in Concord. As a citizen of Concord, I very much appreciate Chris's ability to rehabilitate some of the older buildings in town to the benefit of the character of the town. Our infrastructure is stronger than it was 30 years ago, and our recreational department offerings are much expanded thanks to Chris and his leadership team. Personally, I've always appreciated Chris's calm demeanor, his truly astounding ability to listen to people, whether they're friends or foes, and his interest in the Red Sox, as well as his personal friendship. I hope that he has a very healthy, long, and happy retirement with Jackie.
That I have ever met somebody who can retain the amount of information, facts and figures, personalities, documents. He's got all of that at the tip of his fingers. He's got a brain like a supercharged hard drive.
Probably the single biggest thing as town moderator that I admired was his ability to speak clearly, present complicated stuff in a very limited period of time. Many people will negotiate for more time when they're presenting, but Chris never really did that. He was so skilled at doing it in less time than he'd been allocated.
I don't think a lot of people realize how difficult the job being town manager is. And the job being town manager in Concord is a few ratchets above the normal.
I'm here on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail at the Neshoba Brook Crossing to give a big shout out to the town manager, Chris Whalen. The town manager has always been very enthusiastic about having a trail for people to be able to get out of their cars and get people from point A to point B in an environmentally friendly and a healthful way. And I look forward to taking a ride, and I hope you do too.
It's really great having worked for Chris Whalen. He allows the members of the senior management team to really follow their passion, to be able to do something where they can experience success. It's just been an absolute pleasure to be able to work for him and work with him and feel really like I'm part of a team, I'm part of something really special.
Well, there's really no way to overstate it. Thank you, Chris, for all you've done through all these years. And, you know, our town probably ought to tremble at the thought of anybody trying to fill your shoes. Thank you.
Thank you for being a mentor.
For serving the town, for your service to our community, and most of all, your friendship for the citizens of Concord. Best of luck in your retirement.
So Chris, you're really going to be missed. Thank you for everything that you've done for the town. You have been a great town manager.
Thank you, Chris, for your support and for having my back. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for your patience, for your encouragement, for promoting Concord moving forward.
We are all thankful for his service.
So I don't think that Chris is sufficiently embarrassed yet, so we've got one more speaker.
I'll do my best in a kind way, in my way. So we are sad to be saying goodbye to Chris tonight. Chris's vision and anticipation of a challenging career brought him to Concord as a young man, and he and the town have grown up together. Now, Concord is on the brink of a transition of leadership with all the risks and possibilities this allows. I hope that we'll remember the successful adventure we've experienced together with Chris as we move ahead as a community. Chris, as you enter your next chapter, your footprints may be seen throughout the town. I'm sure there have been times when you felt underappreciated, underacknowledged. Tonight, we'll correct that in some small fashion. You are one of those truly rare collaborative leaders. Rather than articulating your own vision for Concord, that vision was crafted together with town leaders, staff, residents, and through town meeting. You created the senior management team we've heard about as the forum to integrate operations and planning, everything from town budgets to sidewalks. You brought to them the aspirations of boards, committees, departments, individuals, advocates. You embody the idea of systems thinking, and you valued shared decision-making. If asked about a project's success, you often pointed to the team. Your essence is told in your steadfast honesty and integrity. These are not traits that you possess. These are the inherent qualities that make you, you. Life in Concord in the past 26 years has not been without its challenges. But perhaps what's led to your long tenure here is that you are continually challenged to solve new problems in new ways, allowing you to grow professionally. Think back to the 1990s when you arrived here. The internet was in its infancy. Meter readers had to come by every home in Concord to record data. New schools were being envisioned and would eventually or ultimately be built, and climate change and sustainability were not common in the lexicon. When you arrived here, there was no need for an IT director, seamless networks, and surely no Wi-Fi. GIS mapping of the town was never imagined. Your footprints are left in every corner of town, on the solar panels on our old capped landfill, the acquisition of the W.R. Gray Superfund site for a solar field and bus facility, ending years of town meeting debate. And there are many new recreation opportunities in Emerson and Rideout Fields, at Ripley and the Beede Center, and more. But your legacy is also marked by your commitment to holding Concord's conservation and farming roots as your vision, building partnerships that have led to significant land purchases. Madison Field, Balls Hill, Barrett's Mill Farm, Marshall Farm, and probably others. And as you may have a bit more time ahead, take a walk through these lands and know that you played a role. You honored a town meeting and the democratic process of our legislative body. You worked to meet its goals and followed through on its mandates. Perhaps what we value most about you is that you've been accessible, a friend and a neighbor. I think you truly love your job. And although your calendar is often full, you'll always find the time to meet with individuals, share your rich history of the issues, and respond genuinely. And Jackie, are you here? Jackie, where's Jackie? I need to see Jackie. Oh, there's Jackie. All right, back there, Jane. In all the years that Chris has committed to Concord, you have been at his side, helping and guiding along the way, and have always been a support for him. We could never thank you enough. Please join me in congratulating Chris and Jackie as they enter the next phase of their lives.
Well, it's almost a shame to go back to work. Mr. McCain moves to take up no business after 10 p.m. and that when we adjourn and reconvene at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, April 9, 2019, in this hall. And I want to point out that this motion will be made tonight. And tomorrow night, Tuesday, it will not be made on Wednesday, just so everyone is aware of that. Is there a second for this motion? I see that there is. Would all those who are in favor of the preliminary motion please raise your ballot? Thank you. All those opposed? Okay, so I see that the motion passes by a large majority, and I do so declare. Mr. McCain moves that Article 1 be left open for such other action thereunder as may be necessary, and that the meeting take up Article 2. Our first motion under Article 2 is from Mr. McCain, who moves that the town vote to receive the 2018 annual town report. Do I have a second? I see that I do. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? I see that that motion carries again by a very wide margin. That is a vote, and I do so declare. Our next article is the consent calendar. You see the motion for the consent calendar. It is on the screen. There are 16 articles on the consent calendar. Consent calendar is printed in your Finance Committee report. Let's see if I can tell you what the page is. And I will note that there is A difference in the consent calendar appears at page 59 in the Finance Committee report. And two differences from the consent calendar as it appears in the Finance Committee report and as it is being moved are that Articles 39 and 44 have been removed from the consent calendar. And Article 45 is moved as printed in the handout applicable to the article, and that is, I'll show you the differences between what's printed in the Finance Committee report and what's in the handout when we get to that article. And so the motion is that we take up these articles and move on them without debate on any of the articles, provided that if there's any 5 voters who would like to remove any one of these articles from the consent calendar, we will remove it, and it will be taken up and fully debated in the ordinary course of business. We'll go through these one by one, and I'll pause to see if anybody, if there are 5 voters who would like to take a particular article off. Please note that this consent calendar requires a 2/3 vote, and that is because we do have several housekeeping zoning bylaw amendments, which do require a 2/3 vote on the consent calendar. Do we have a second for the consent calendar? I see that we do. Okay. All right. Article 3. This one is meeting procedure. This is a routine and non-controversial article that's been moved several years, more than 15 actually, and basically it requires that if an amendment is made to an article that is going to increase spending, the source of the spending be identified in order to keep us on the correct side of Proposition 2.5. And the full text is on the handout that's on the table. Both the Finance Committee and the Select Board recommend affirmative action on Article 3. Is there anyone who would like to remove Article 3 from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, we will move to Article 4. Article 4 is the ratification of the Personnel Board classification actions. This is a routine and non-controversial action. The town needs to adjust job descriptions and positions that are available on its full roster of positions for town staff annually, and you can see that certain titles have been added, such as telecommunications director, and it is the responsibility of town meeting to ratify the actions that have been taken by the Personnel Board. Both the Finance Committee and the Select Board recommend affirmative action on Article 4. Is there anyone who would like to remove this article from the consent calendar? Thank you. Seeing no one, we'll proceed to Article 5. Article 5 is the classification and compensation plan for regular status positions. This, again, routine and non-controversial. This basically sets the salary ranges for the various positions that are available to be staffed within the town. It doesn't set any individual salary. That's done by management. Again, this is an action that's done by our Personnel Board, and it requires ratification by town meeting. Both the Select Board and the Finance Committee recommend affirmative action on the article. Is there anybody who would like to remove Article 5 from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, we will proceed to Article 17. Article 17 is the use of free cash. And this is an annual action that's routine. It is the transfer of surplus funds in the amount of $1 million. It has been standard at this amount for a number of years. And this amount is applied to reduce the overall tax levy that will be made against all of Concord taxpayers. The surplus results from revenue collection exceeding the estimates, or from actual expenditures being less than what was anticipated and appropriated. And this is more fully explained in the Finance Committee report at page 48. Both the Select Board and the Finance Committee recommend affirmative action on Article 17. Is there anyone who'd like to remove Article 17 from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing no one, we'll proceed to Article 21. Article 21 seeks the town's affirmative action on the acceptance of Mass General Laws, Chapter 54, Section 16A, which allows the town clerk to fill positions of unexpectedly absent election workers. This has proved sometimes to be a problem when last-minute absences occur, because the way that it currently works is there needs to be a select board action, is that right? There needs to be a meeting convened, and it isn't always convenient or possible to convene the select board for a meeting to appoint new election officers. This statute would allow the town clerk in those emergency situations to simply draft somebody to be there as an election officer. Both the select board recommends affirmative action on this article, and let me ask if there's anybody who would like to remove this article from the consent calendar. Okay, seeing no one, we'll proceed to Article 31. This is a zoning bylaw amendment on handicap parking. And this is a housekeeping amendment that brings the language of the zoning bylaw into consistency with changes in language and terminology that have been made at state law. It was non-controversial at hearing. The planning board and the select board recommend affirmative action on Article 31. Is there anyone who would like to remove this one from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to Article 32. This is a zoning bylaw amendment for the Groundwater Conservancy District. This is another housekeeping amendment that makes the language used in the zoning bylaw consistent with language in state law. When state law changes what's in the statutes, we need to change what's in our bylaw to be consistent with the state law. This one also was non-controversial at hearing. The planning board and the select board recommend affirmative action on Article 32. Is there anyone who would like to remove Article 32 from the consent calendar? Okay. Seeing no one, we'll move to Article 33. Article 33 is another zoning bylaw amendment. This is on the marijuana establishment temporary moratorium. You may recall that we had in place a temporary moratorium prior to the town adopting a general bylaw that prohibits all non-medical marijuana establishments. That temporary moratorium is now superfluous, and this is a housekeeping article to remove that, repeal that temporary moratorium in order to bring the bylaw into conformance with the 2018 bylaw that was adopted by the town to ban non-medical marijuana. And both the planning board and the select board, again, recommend affirmative action on this article. Is there anyone who would like to remove this one from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing no one, we'll move to the next one. This is Article 34. This is another zoning bylaw amendment. This is a housekeeping amendment to correct a formatting error in the zoning bylaw. It makes no substantive change. It just clarifies the text of the bylaw. Both the planning board and the select board recommend affirmative action on Article 34 relating to non-conforming single and two-family residence structures. Is there anybody who'd like to remove this article from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing no one, we'll proceed to Article 36. This is a zoning bylaw amendment dealing with the floodplain conservancy district map. This article is, again, routine, non-controversial at hearing. This is an action by the town to adopt changes that have been made by the Federal Emergency Management Agency to the flood insurance rate map. And incidentally, if we don't do this, we can't get flood insurance. So both the planning board and the select board recommend affirmative action on Article 36. And let me ask if there is anyone who would like to remove this article from the consent calendar. Okay, seeing no one, we will move to Article 37. And this is another housekeeping amendment on large ground-mounted solar table of uses. and there were some inconsistencies between the table and the text of the bylaw. This amendment fixes those. It doesn't make a substantive change. Both the Planning Board and the Select Board recommend affirmative action on Article 37. Is there anyone who would like to remove this article from the consent calendar? Okay. Seeing no one, we'll move to Article 38. Article 38 is light plant expenditures and payment in lieu of taxes. This article also is recommended for affirmative action by the Select Board and also by the Finance Committee. And this is a standard routine enterprise fund authorization that simply is an authorization by town meeting to allow the light plant to use the fees it collects to run its operations, and also to authorize the payment in lieu of taxes that the light plant makes to the town every year to help reduce the tax levy. Is there anybody who'd like to remove Article 38 from the consent calendar? Okay, we'll move on then to Article 40. Article 40 is sewer system expenditures. This also is a routine annual enterprise fund authorization. It's regularly included on the consent calendar, was non-controversial at hearing, and again, this article authorizes basically the sewer system to spend the fees it collects in order to run its operations. Both the Finance Committee and the Select Board recommend affirmative action on Article 40. Is there anybody who would like to remove this one from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing no one, we will move to Article 41. Article 41 is the sewer improvement fund expenditures. Oh, and I think I forgot to mention on the last one that the Public Works Commission is also recommending affirmative action on that. Article 41 is sewer improvement fund expenditures. These are fees that are paid. This fund is created by fees that are paid by certain customers who connect to the sewer system, and it's a sub-fund of the sewer fund, and these fees are used to fund construction and expansion of sewer lines as well as treatment facility capacity. This is another routine annual action. The Public Works Commission, the Select Board, and the Finance Committee all recommend affirmative action. Is there anybody who would like to remove Article 41 from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing no one, we'll move to Article 42. This is the water system expenditures. Public Works Commission, Select Board, Finance Committee all recommend affirmative action. Again, this is a routine annual enterprise fund authorization, regularly included on the consent calendar. The water fund consists of fees paid by users, and this article authorizes the Water Department to spend those fees in the conduct of its operation, maintenance, and capital replacement. Is there anybody who would like to remove Article 42 from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, we'll move to Article 45. Now, Article 45, that's very colorful. That's just to wake everybody up now because it's been the same colors for a while. This one looks a little different because we try really hard to get all these motions right before they end up on the screen here, and we made a mistake on this one. So we ended up with the wrong numbers in here as it was printed in the Finance Committee report, and also the wrong place where $2,471,594 was coming. It was coming not from interest income, but from retained earnings, and we must be very precise about these things. So what you see on the screen is those are the correct numbers highlighted in yellow, and the correct location for that $2,471,000 number is retained earnings. And this, again, is a routine enterprise fund authorization that is often included on the consent calendar. It was non-controversial at hearing. And the Recreation Commission, the Finance Committee, and the Select Board all recommend affirmative action. Is there anybody who would like to remove Article 45 from the consent calendar? Okay. All right, we'll move to the next one. And the next one is our original motion back again. It should be, yes? Okay, that's our original motion back again. We are now ready for a vote on the consent calendar. And I will remind you that the consent calendar requires a 2/3 vote because of the presence of the zoning bylaw amendments on it. And I will now ask all those in favor to please raise their paper ballots. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your ballots. Okay, that passes by a near unanimous vote, and I do so declare. It's well over 2/3. Okay, having addressed Articles 3, 4, and 5 on the consent calendar, we will now move to Article 6, which is the town budget. And we will hear from our town treasurer, Ms. Carrie LaFleur.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 6 requests that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $49,052,504 for the operation of town departments and joint accounts for fiscal '20. This request is in conformance with the Finance Committee's guideline. Please refer to the handout for the specific wording of the motion. In reviewing this budget request, you likely noticed that it looked different than in prior years. These differences include the wording of the appropriation, the variety of funding sources used to support the general fund budget, and the relatively large increase in full-time equivalents to support enhanced service levels. Each of these items will be reviewed in this presentation. The town's internal service departments provide many services to our operations, such as payroll, accounts payable, recruitment, and general administrative oversight. These services are performed by staff in the finance department, human resources, and the town manager's office. The enterprise funds reimburse the general fund for the cost of these services. However, in prior years, this reimbursement was made through a non-appropriated interfund transfer. Best practice and the town's auditor have suggested that these transfers be included as a part of the budgetary request. For comparison purposes, fiscal 18 and 19 appropriations shown in the warrant have been restated as if these appropriations had been made. This slide identifies all transfers and credits included in the fiscal '20 budget. Transfers are made from appropriations and other funds requiring appropriation, while credits come from funds that don't require town meeting appropriation. For example, under this budget proposal, the sewer fund will transfer a total of $250,911 to the general fund for services provided, including engineering services for sewer projects and use of space in town-owned buildings. As a result, part of the motion to approve the budget under Article 6 will include a request for an appropriation from the sewer fund. As noted earlier, this request includes a significant increase in full-time equivalents needed to support the level of services being provided under this proposal. New or enhanced services included in the proposal are shown on the slide. In 2013, the Concord Fire Department prepared an emergency services strategic plan. The plan highlighted that the town was over-reliant on mutual aid for EMS and called for the implementation of full ambulance service in West Concord. Service was established 12 hours a day, 7 days a week in 2014 with very favorable results. Reliance on mutual aid for EMS response from surrounding town dropped from 18% to 4%, well within industry standards. Overall departmental response improved, particularly in the event of simultaneous calls. And the average call to arrival times improved from 5 minutes and 54 seconds to 3 minutes and 52 seconds during the time that A3 was in service. meeting the industry standards set by NFPA 1710 and the American Heart Association, calling for a maximum response time of 5 minutes in the event of a cardiac arrest, or 4 to 6 minutes, I messed it up, starting basic life-saving emergency medical services within 4 to 6 minutes. However, response times still lag industry standards during the time that A3 is out of service, with an average call to arrival time of 5 minutes and 20 seconds. To meet this demand, the fiscal 20 budget calls for the implementation of overnight coverage at West Concord Station. The cost of this new service will be partially offset in years 1, 2, and 3 by using money in the Emergency Services Stabilization Fund. This fund was established under Article 29 of the 2012 annual town meeting and funded with a $1 million payment from the Muse development to be used to mitigate the impact of emergency response capacity. $350,000 of this was used to offset Phase 1 to establish the first part of the service 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and $470,000 is proposed to be used to offset the second phase. In year 4, 100% of this cost will be borne by the general fund budget. Over the past few years, the town has worked diligently to create a facilities management division to ensure comprehensively planned and managed facilities maintenance, as recommended by the Facilities Planning Committee in 2003. This year's budget request includes funding 2 additional FTEs to have a full complement of skilled tradespersons, allowing for a significant portion of maintenance work to be done in-house in a cost-effective manner. Recent examples of proposed work are shown on the slide. This budget request includes 2 additional FTEs to assist existing IT staff meeting the division's objectives regarding application system availability, user support, and staying current with technology. In particular, these additional FTEs will focus on providing services to public safety in the areas of records and evidence management, the booking system, and mobile data terminals. And at the library, we'll work on improving network security and developing documentation for the IT infrastructure. Over the past year, the town has acquired or renovated several new active recreational parklands, including Giroux Park on Warner's Pond, the White Pond Beach area, and Phase 1 improvements at Rideout Field. The fiscal 20 request is being made to establish a new division to oversee the care and maintenance of these areas and to oversee further capital improvements, the funding of which is sought under Article 7, the town's fiscal 20 capital improvement plan. Similarly, 2 years ago, the town assumed responsibility of the operation of the Visitor Center and public restroom facility on Main Street. The Visitor Center is open daily April through October and serves as a clearinghouse for information about the town, its historic sites, and current events, and provides tours to interested parties. While the budget includes funding for both of these operations, it is anticipated that each will move toward being self-funding in coming years. The balance of the proposed increase is in joint accounts, which are those accounts that are shared between the town and school department, such as insurance, debt service, and retirement expenditures. The single largest increase in this category is for group insurance. In fiscal 20, the town is offering incentives to employees enrolling in the most cost-effective plans with the intention of creating savings for both town and employee. This budget continues the practice of fully funding the OPEB ARC. As of the most recent valuation, the OPEB liability was approximately 32% funded. To recap, the proposed budget is in conformance with the guidelines set by the Finance Committee in November. The budget motion includes transfers and credits from other funds to which the general fund provides services, detailed in the handout. The budget request includes the level of funding needed to support existing services and to provide the increased service levels in the areas of maintenance of municipal facilities, technology, ambulance service, parks, and playground. We respectfully ask for your support of Article 6.
Thank you very much, Ms. LaFleur. I'd like to ask if we have a second for the motion. Thank you very much. I see that we do. And I want to note that there is, in fact, a 2/3 vote required on this article because it includes expenditures from stabilization funds. So that's why we need a 2/3 vote on this. It doesn't say so on the slide, but we do need a 2/3 vote. Couple of things right now. We are at 772 attendees at town meeting, good for us. I want to remind everyone that you may watch the proceedings from the cafeteria, but you may not vote in there. In order to vote, you have to be in a seat in here. And there are still seats up front and sprinkled around for people who haven't found one yet. Okay. And Carrie, you can sit if you wish so that you aren't standing and waiting. We're now going to invite questions and comments from the floor. We have 4 microphones available, and I want to point out that we do have 1 con microphone and 1 pro microphone this evening. There's a con microphone over there in that aisle. There's a pro microphone over there to my right, your left, the green sign on it. The yellow microphones are for questions, not necessarily pro or con. And on the far side, we have a low microphone, which is our accessible microphone that can be used for any purpose. Each speaker from the floor will have 2 minutes. You'll see your time counting down on the time block that's in the screen up there, so you can keep track of how you're doing. And let me remind you that this is a meeting to conduct the legislative business of town. There's no place in it for clapping and cheering, except for the retirement of our longstanding town manager. Booing or other demonstrations from the audience. And while we do expect the discussion to be rigorous on the issues, we expect it to be gentle on the individuals. When you approach a microphone, please state your name and your address. And when you're recognized, direct your remarks only to the moderator. And you will win the gratitude and affection of the meeting if you keep your comments focused and concise, if you respect the time limit, and if you yield the floor when your point has actually already been made by others recognized before you got to the microphone. Okay. All right. The floor is open. Are there questions or comments on Article 6, the town budget? And I should say, if I have not already, that the Select Board and the Finance Committee have both recommended affirmative action on the budget. Do you have to walk that far with a question? I'm going to make an exception for you, but when we have a lot of people, we're not going to do it. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. My name is Tim Rose, 97 Bartlett Hill Road.
Mr. Rose.
Madam Moderator, I just have one question. If we could have a little more explanation as to why the visitor center and restroom has doubled or more, and what the comment about it being self-funding meant.
Ms. LaFleur? Ms. Hodges? Someone will answer your question.
Madam Moderator?
Ms. Hodges?
The Visitor Center was taken over a couple of years ago, and it is run through the Recreation Department. In years past, the town budget only represented a small portion of what was needed to run the Visitor Center. It was just for the maintenance of the actual bathrooms. This year, we're accounting for the entire budget, and so what you'll see is that's the total amount of money that we are going to be using to run the operation, including the staff that do tours, et cetera. But it also will represent money that's being transferred in from the Recreation Revolving Fund. So the amount to the general fund actually is going down, but the amount overall is more representative of what we're actually spending to run the center. Does that answer the question?
Mr. Rose, you can't do that. You have to go to the microphone. Thank you.
Yes, the other part of the question was you had mentioned, or the treasurer had mentioned, that it was to become self-funding?
Correct. Our goal, we have a plan where we are hiring a full-time tourism visitor services manager, pending the approval of the budget, of course. And the plan is for that to run similar to the recreation revolving account, where we're running programs and events which are generating revenue in order to sustain the operation.
Thank you, Ms. Hodges. Are there any more questions or comments? I see someone approaching a microphone. One of the questions on the questionnaire this year is going to be whether people want to see pro and con microphones ever, never, more, fewer. So do fill out the survey. Yes.
Thanks. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. It's Todd Needham, 25 Partridge Lane.
Sir?
I did peruse through the budget, but due to my lack of education and knowledge, I couldn't figure out how much the town is looking to borrow, if at all, during fiscal year 2020. If someone could answer that question for me.
Ms. LaFleur?
So on an annual basis, the town approves a capital improvement plan at town meeting on an annual basis. The plan is usually about $4 to $6 million. And so that the borrowing, we borrow for projects when the projects have been completed or they're near completed. So the motion under Article 7 doesn't necessarily represent the exact projects for which we will borrow, but the borrowing is about $4 to $6 million based on the approvals in the capital plan.
And so hello? Oh, so the borrowing is not to fund the operation of the town, it's specific to projects?
It's specific to capital projects,
Okay,
yes.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no one else at a microphone. Oh, am I missing someone? Thank you. Yes, pro microphone.
Hi, Nancy Carr, 12 Nancy Road.
Ms. Carr?
I have a question about the visitor center. The bathrooms are open 12 months a year. Will they be taken care of the 12 months of the year? I know the visitor center itself is closed during the...
We'll hear from Ms. Hodges.
Okay.
The short answer is yes, and the longer answer is yes. And it's the regular part of the center, non-bathrooms, with the creation of this full-time employee will also be open year-round. Our plan is to have the visitor center open year-round.
Oh, so the visit will be open. Okay.
That's the plan.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like we're ready for a vote. Again, Article 6 requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of Article 6, please raise your ballot. Thank you very much. All those opposed? I think that's a unanimous vote. You see anyone opposed? No, that's it. Oh, one opposed. Thank you. That's a near unanimous vote, and it passes by a wide majority over the 2/3. Article 6 does, and I do so declare. We'll now proceed to Article 7. And do we have a second? The motion is on the screen. It's moved as printed in the handout. The handout is in the hallway. Do we have a second for Article 7? I see that we do. And we'll hear from Ms. Hodges.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Okay. Article 7 seeks an appropriation of $3.9 million in capital improvement projects for the town. This requested amount is divided among 6 projects within the Departments of Facilities and Parks, Planning and Land Management, Public Works, and the Library. Project number 1 is for the renovation and upkeep of town buildings. $500,000 of capital will be allocated to fund maintenance and repair efforts within the 13 municipal facilities in town which house the administrative, executive, and operational functions of the town. This map provides a visual representation of Concord's facilities, which are currently used by the various town departments. Project number 2 relates to parkland improvements. Over the past 18 months, the town has either acquired or is in the process of acquiring several new park and recreation parcels in town. The capital plan seeks to allocate $1.4 million towards the design, construction, and renovation of both passive and active recreation areas. The Giroux parcel indicated here with an X at the top left was purchased in July of last year with the approval of town meeting. White Pond, seen in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, is being gifted to the town by the White Pond Associates. Both new park areas are in need of planning, updating, and major renovations to make them open and accessible to members of the public. Additional funds from this category will also be used at Rideout and at Emerson Park for maintenance and small improvements, both by the Parks Division and by the Department of Public Works. The White Pond Beach Associates are graciously giving their 13-acre parcel to the town. The acquisition of this property as an asset is a source of tremendous excitement and opportunity for residents, but requires updates and improvements to be code compliant and accessible. Currently, swimming is permitted from the beach area accessible off Plainfield Road. There's also a state-owned boat launch adjacent to the swimming area and 2 separate fairly rudimentary restrooms which have been built into the hillside with a steep incline. Under the current conditions, the beach waterfront areas, parking, and restrooms are neither accessible nor compliant with current accessibility and building codes. The town plans to use between $550,000 and $600,000 in capital to assist in completing Phase 1 of what will be a multi-year plan and renovation project for the property. The Rec Department has already purchased a new restroom trailer similar to the one seen here on the left, which is going to be installed for this season and is fully accessible. Through the creation of a master plan and public needs assessment, the town plans to fully assess circulation and parking improvements near the front of the property and on Plainfield Road, design new stairs or switchback walkways from the parking area to the beach, which are code compliant and easier to traverse, create handicapped accessible parking to access upgrades to the property, evaluate and design improvements for stormwater management, vehicular traffic, and vegetation management, which will work to improve the overall quality of the parcel and create better pond water quality. The total cost of Phase 1 is estimated to be about $850,000. In addition to the $600,000 from capital, the town has also requested $250,000 from CPC, which will be discussed during Article 22. The firm Weston & Sampson will be assisting the town in the planning and construction efforts related to the beach, boat launch, and parking areas. This drawing depicts a similar project which is currently underway for the town of Hudson's Fort Meadow Lake. The schematic for White Pond, while not exact, will be similar in terms of drainage, sustainable planning efforts, and the creation of meandering pathways through wooded areas which allow for more gradual means of egress and will provide shaded areas for picnicking, reading, and nature observation. In addition to White Pond's major renovation, $600,000 is planned to be used from capital to begin renovations for the newly acquired Giroux property, which the town received in July. The single-family home was recycled during the early spring months, and the park design is well underway. We are hopeful, pending funding, to begin construction in the early summer. Initial work in Phase 1 is estimated to cost between $800,000 and $900,000 and will include the design and engineering of a new park entrance driveway and parking area that runs immediately adjacent to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. New grading and drainage for the property, which uses natural plantings, evergreens, and alternating flowering deciduous trees, relocation of existing roadway, and the creation of walking paths throughout the park, and the installation of 2 composting toilets at the center of the park, which we plan to have open year-round. The town has also requested an additional $250,000 from CPC and was approved for $200,000 in funding. Again, this will be discussed during Article 22. Using the beautiful water's edge as a focal point for the property, we have began working with our design team to create spaces where people of all ages and abilities can enjoy. There will be an area onshore where one can launch small, non-motorized watercrafts and another boat launch decking system as seen here on the right that's fully ADA accessible. Phase 1 of the project is estimated to cost about $800,000 and will be constructed over a period of 2 years. This year, work to be included and paid through the capital plan is the creation of a new access drive, excavation and clearing of invasive species, grading, loaming, walking paths, the restroom, and improved drainage. We also plan to provide parking for about 40 to 50 cars. Item number 3 allocates $100,000 in capital to assist with the acquisition of the Emerson land immediately behind the police station along the Emerson-Thoreau Amble. The purchase of parcel B depicted here will ensure permanent public access to the Emerson-Thoreau Amble and work to preserve the water quality from the adjacent stream by filtering sediment and runoff before it enters the water systems and protects the water banks from erosion. The preservation also provides storage areas for floodwaters and food habitat for area wildlife. The southern portion of Lot 5 property line is bounded by the cart path, which continues through to the town forest. Across the cart path is land on which Concord Housing Authority has 6 units. The principal use for Lot 5 would be continued to be used for farming and community gardens, as well as open space and passive recreation. Town ownership of this property would ensure continued use of the cart path and preservation of the public access to the amble. Projects 4 and 5 relate to road and parking improvements managed and overseen by the Department of Public Works. $800,000 is allocated in capital for road and parking lot reconstruction. An additional $600,000 has been allocated from capital to provide a construction contingency of $12 million for the Cambridge Turnpike project, which is currently underway. Any funds within the construction contingency line item that are not used for Cambridge Turnpike will be reallocated to the roads program in order to accelerate any deferred projects from years past. Here you can see Public Works' preliminary plan for pavement improvements within the 2019 and 20 construction seasons. Overall, it's about 2¼ miles of roadway improvements that have been planned. These include stretches on Sudbury Road from Heath's Bridge Road to 7 Star Lane, Monument Street from Balls Hill to Silver Road, and Old Marlboro from Ornac to Harrington Ave. The final project seeks to allocate $550,000 in capital funds to be used by the library to purchase furniture, lighting, and new amenities. The library has proposed an ambitious expansion and renovation project which works to support the ways in which Concord residents read, learn, and live in a digital age. The ability to meet patrons' needs continues to be a challenge at the main branch, and the Library Corporation has committed to their expansion efforts. Preliminary schematic designs for renovations have been completed, and the total project's renovation cost is estimated at about $8.3 million. The $550,000 asked for will assist in the planned renovations of the main library special collection space, as well as proposed meeting and maker spaces, which will be contained within the renovated house structure at 151 Main. The town would appreciate your affirmative action on Article 7.
Okay, Ms. Hodges, take a breath.
And I was a minute over. Sorry, Madam Moderator.
It's all right.
I'm sweating.
Jeez. Why don't you have a seat for a moment, because we're going to hear now from library trustees Jeff Adams and John Boynton, who are going to tell us a little bit more about the library project.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. We will do our best to distill almost 150 years of history into 5 minutes.
Mr. Adams, would you tell everyone which one of those 2 people I announced you are?
I am Jeff Adams, and this is John Boynton, and we are trustees of the Library Corporation.
And you both live in Concord, right?
Farmers Cliff Road.
72 Chestnut.
And we appreciate
Thank you.
the opportunity to present this important project to you tonight on the first evening of what happens to be National Libraries Week.
Our library was established in 1873 by a generous gift from William Monroe, a native Concordian. He proposed a public-private partnership between the town of Concord and the nonprofit Library Corporation to provide a library for the benefit of this community. The corporation would own the buildings, grounds, and special collections, and the town would fund staff, utilities, books, and materials. It is a partnership that has performed admirably for 146 years. The library serves everyone and is bursting at the seams. Each day, over 900 people visit the library. Each year, over 6,000 children and 8,000 adults attend library programs. Everything is free. Contrary to what many expected in this age of Google, your library is busier than ever, and we need more space to meet growing demand.
In 2013, the historic Hayward Benjamin House at 151 Main Street was put up for sale. Recognizing a rare opportunity, the corporation consulted with the town manager to confirm his support for an expanded library. With that support, the corporation put in a winning bid and the planning began. In the fall of 2013, guided by the town's strategic plan for the library, we formed a task force to imagine the opportunities that might come from the new expanded space. Over 5 years, we reached out to stakeholders, the town, the library committee, friends of the library, experts, staff, and patrons via focus groups, interviews, surveys, and public meetings. We had frequent meetings with town officials and conducted a feasibility study. We have aligned the design with the town's sustainability principles. The building systems are high efficiency and entirely electric, with no fossil fuels in the expansion, which will be 48% less energy per square foot than the baseline library project in the United States. We are proud of the design that has emerged from this process. Rest assured, the beloved historic spaces will remain unchanged. The project, which will add 37% to the library's floor area, will focus on new, flexible spaces to satisfy demands that we cannot presently meet. Parents asked for more inviting spaces for children to engage with literature and hands-on activity. The new children's library will be 50% larger. Middle and high school students asked for more comfortable, collaborative work areas. Those are in the plan. Adults requested spaces to relax and socialize with friends, especially while their kids are at a puppet show or story hour. The Commons, a sunny space with cafe tables and banquettes, will deliver. Patrons of all ages have asked for spaces where people can convene and learn from each other in a hands-on kind of way. Welcome to the workshop. Seniors are looking for more daytime programming. The forum will seat 140 and serve intellectual content of all flavors. The expanded library will offer something for patrons of all ages. And as always, all services will continue to be offered free of charge.
Over the past 5 years, we met regularly with the town manager and his department heads to seek their guidance as the project took shape. The town made financial contributions to the past 2 building projects for furniture, fixtures, and equipment at the main library in 2005 and for accessibility and historic preservation at Fowler in 2011. We sought the town manager's input on a funding plan consistent with past practice, and we crafted a plan to request $1.2 million of the $10 million budget in the form of capital projects and CPA funding. Article 7 directs $550,000 for the purchase of furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and Article 22, the CPA funding article, recommends $500,000 for historic preservation and accessibility improvements of the Haywood Benjamin House. Combined with $150,000 for energy efficient systems approved last year at town meeting, we will have met the goal developed in partnership with the town. The balance of funding will come from private fundraising. According to the plan, public sources will represent 12% of funds raised, and the balance, $8.8 million, or 88%, will come from donations. We've raised $6 million against this ambitious goal, and this spring we will kick off the community phase of fundraising. Stay tuned for more on that front. We plan to break ground this fall and invite each and every one of you to get involved. The Library Corporation and our 13,174 library card holders, roughly 70% of Concord households, are grateful for your generous support of the library.
Thank you very much. I want to remind everyone that this article requires a 2/3 vote. And I want to announce that both the Select Board and the Finance Committee recommend affirmative action on Article 7, and we'll now open the floor for questions and comments.
Madam Moderator, I have an amendment to offer.
Ms. Kehoe.
Thank you.
I believe we have your amendment in our slide deck.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Dory Keough, 51 MacArthur Road. I move to amend Article 7, item number 2, Parks and Improvements, from $1,400,000 to $0. Before the town meetings of 2018, neither the Giroux property, which abuts Warner's Pond, nor the White Pond property were even a gleam in the eyes of Concord voters, and so have not been any part of any long-term planning. Both properties were presented to voters as offering a place for Concordians to swim. Warner's Pond is not now swimmable and will not be so without the expenditure of millions of dollars for dredging. Making the pond swimmable is not part of this article. In recent years, White Pond has a checkered history of being able to allow swimming during the summers, and this article will do nothing to solve the algae problems that prevent swimming. A very small portion of these funds will go to the ride-out playground. The cost of this article will be borne by Concord taxpayers, our neighbors and our friends, many of whom have lived in Concord for years, have contributed to the vibrancy of our town, and are now struggling to pay current real estate taxes, let alone the millions of dollars of other new funds requested for this town meeting. And we are on notice that the future years will bring requests for many more millions for school and municipal improvements. We think we are at the tipping point. It's time for Concord to think about the distinction between wants and needs. We must begin to have thoughtful, long-term planning for the funding of Concord needs and to plan judiciously for the discretionary meeting of Concord wants. Please join me in voting to amend Article 7 by reducing the expenditure requested in Item 2, Park Improvements, from $1,400,000 to zero. I thank you. Concord, thank you. Concord taxpayers will thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kehoe. Ms. Hodges, is there any reply to the amendment that the town would like to make? Yes, thank you. Is there a second for the amendment? I see that there is. Thank you. Thank you.
I believe you've heard what I have to say about it in my presentation, but Ryan Kane, who's our Recreation Director, would like to speak particularly on the park improvement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ryan Kane, Director of Recreation and not a resident of Concord. The recent additions of the gift from White Pond Associates and the Drouot land purchase and planned improvements are in line with recommendations from both the 2014 Recreation Facility Strategic Plan, in addition to the Town Long Range Plan recently done. The 2014 Recreation Facility Strategic Plan called for strategic recommendations that include explore public swimming, in addition to start up outdoor recreation and environmental programming, including kayaking, canoeing, etc. This included the need for boat access and rentals. In addition, the 2018 Townwide Long Range Plan called for recommendations that include, under the Implementation Action Chart 4.5 for Mobility and Transportation, goal number 3, action number 4, which is to study possible paths and trails and create better links to nature preserves and recreational lands and other destinations in town. Additionally, under the Long Range Plan, the Implementation Action 4.6, Open Space and Natural Resources, goal number 1, action number 2, is to restore White Pond and Warner's Ponds as part of the town's effort to protect and improve recreational accessibility and its water resources. Under the same action item, goal number 8 is to ensure that all Concord residents understand the value of open space and recreational amenities, and include action item number 2 to ensure that Concord's open space and recreation facilities are fiscally and financially accessible to residents. Goal number 9, also under the same action plan, calls for enhancement, the connections and access to physical and programmatical bike paths and walking trails between open spaces built in environmental businesses, institution, organizations, and recreation sites. This included parking spaces, public beach, picnic pavilions, fitness circuits, restrooms, drinking fountains, bicycle racks, etc. Goal number 10, on the same action item, provide responsible management of open space and recreation amenities, including programming of open space, public spaces, trails, and recreational facilities to allow for equitable opportunities for all Concordians. These are well thought out strategic plans provided by the residents as tools for the staff, and the upcoming park enhancements are supported through these plans. Some of these enhancements are part of the process and some just fell in our lap. They are naturally great challenges with all park enhancements, and currently that is magnified with the attachment to water. In my opinion, these enhancements will ultimately be adding to the benefits that great parks provide and the quality of life of Concord residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. All right. We'll now turn our attention to questions and comments on the motion to amend. So we're talking not about any other project, but only about the motion to amend that you see on the screen to reduce Item number 2, park improvements from 1.4 million to 0. Although the article requires a 2/3 majority to pass, the motion to amend requires only a majority vote. Is there anyone who has a question, or yes? No.
Not a question.
Not you.
Comment?
You have a
on
comment?
the amendment. Yeah,
Con.
I'm standing at the con microphone.
Yes,
Nice
you would like to
making-
speak against the amendment.
Correct.
In your name and address.
Gary Kleiman, 57 Central Street.
Mr. Kleiman.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I just wanted to reinforce one of the points that Mr. Kane, I believe, made about while we were not so fortunate to have planned this a decade ago, that both the Giroux land or White Pond would become available to us, I want to reinforce that even before the long-range plan, which I was a part of, the West Concord Advisory Committee before that and the West Concord Task Force have long been urging for increasing access to waterfront opportunities in West Concord. So it has been a long-standing desire of the community to increase opportunities for waterfront access in West Concord, even though we did not know necessarily how that would come to be. And yes, very recently we have become fortunate enough to come into 2 separate opportunities, but it's been a long-standing desire of several bodies of the town before we acquired them to have that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kleiman. I see anybody else who wishes to, over there? Yes?
Merrill Schwartz, 1471 Main Street.
Ms. Schwartz.
I have a question regarding the usage of White Pond. Up until now, it's been an association with limited membership. And I know that there was some question about who would be able to actually access White Pond, whether there would be membership, and whether this is really going to be an opportunity for all Concord citizens, or will it be limited?
Thank you. I see Ms. Hodges approaching the microphone to answer that question.
Currently, the Recreation Department is selling beach passes. It is not a private association by any means. As a matter of fact, the cost has been effectively split in half from what it was when it was under WPA's auspices. We are limiting the amount of passes that we're doing this year to 700, and we have not hit that number yet. We had held our first public forum and heard from some of the past pass holders and some of our current newer pass holders that they would like to be able to have guest passes that are attached to that. So we've workshopped some things with that as well. And because we want to be able to accept federal and state grants, we can't just limit passes to Concord residents only, but we're able to carve out a percentage. So it's about 10% of the total amount, or somewhere between 65 and 70 passes that we would make available for non-residents. And that fee is at a higher cost than what is for residents. So overall, we feel that it's a very manageable, reasonable price. You'll have access pretty much as you would any other public park, and we are looking this year to learn from the operation and then take that and hopefully expand the hours and the availability of the parcel.
Could you please, sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to know what cost has been decided upon so far, and whether this is going to be a limitation. I mean, is this truly open to the public then, if there's a cost involved?
Okay, for a resident, it's $150 for a pass, and it's for everyone in the household. And of course, much like any other recreation programs, there is a financial aid assistance that you can reach out and talk to our community services coordinator and our recreation director, and we would work with people on a sliding fee if there was a financial difficulty.
Thank you very much. Microphone over there. I don't have any numbers on these microphones. Does that have a number? Against the wall over there. Four. Your microphone number 4. Thank you. That's very helpful. Microphone number 4.
Lindsay O'Brien, 110 Rollingwood Lane.
Ms. O'Brien.
Madam Moderator, I believe I heard there had been some initial quick planning done. What sort of hydrological water influence surveys? Most people may not realize Warner's Pond is the result of flow from Neshoba Brook that's been dammed, whereas White's Pond is essentially groundwater coming up in springs, very much like Walden. So are there any plans in spending this money on doing a comprehensive area survey as to, for example, where all the nutrients are coming that cause the algae blooms? Over.
And your question is with respect to both ponds?
Yeah, well, it's the amendment is for the park and recreation, which covers everything.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hodges, would you like to take that one?
So the ESS group has done a dredging feasibility assessment and conceptual engineering design for Warner's Pond water quality analysis. This is at the Giroux property. They've actually gone back out and redelineated the wetlands, and we are hopefully going to be doing soil testing and boring in and amongst the areas that have the Route 2 runoff that runs underneath the Giroux property and outlets into Warner's Pond. That's all been part of the phase that we had with doing the, with purchasing the property and demolishing the home that was there. So that's fairly well underway. $50,000 has been allocated and asked for through CPC to begin the dredging. And ESS is continuing their work to update their water quality testing, and a full report would be out probably in the next month or so. After they're able to get the other wetland flags up. Regarding White Pond, we actually don't own the property yet. And so what we have done thus far is to do what's called a phase 1 analysis, where we looked at sort of the topographical surveys. We did an analysis of the existing septic that's there and some other runoff. It's very rudimentary. That would be part of the whole master plan process. We would do the same thing there, where we would look at stormwater and any of kind of the adjacent pockets that are there. But that hasn't been conducted yet. Number one, we don't have any funds to do that, to allocate to that. And number two, we don't own it yet.
Thank you very much. 432. Are you microphone number 1, perhaps? Pro. You're pro. Okay, thank you. Yes, pro microphone.
Ann Hayden, 342 Sudbury Road. I'm speaking in support of the reasons for this amendment having come up. I'm still figuring out what I think about all of this, which is when this all came up last year at special town meeting and the regular town meeting for the 2 properties, I don't remember hearing a lot about it was going to cost us a whole lot of money. Great opportunity to do it now, and all of a sudden a whole lot of money which we're going to be expected or need to spend in the next number of years. And we've got a lot of other things that we're going to be talking about tonight, like the middle school building and other needs that we have. And I'm just concerned that the overall planning for everything, I'm feeling like it's not there. And thus, to wait a year, because I sort of thought we weren't even going to have any swimming in White Pond this year, to take a little bit longer, to not spend as much money or all of this money on these 2 projects now as we figure out everything else that we as a town are doing. Because we've got a lot on our plate, and we're going to have to be figuring out what we're doing, and we may have to become more conservative about where we spend our money. So that this is why I am concerned about all of the money that were expected, and thus am looking and thinking that I might be voting for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayden. Microphone number 4.
Hello. Eric Waters, 105 Prairie. My question is...
Mr.
Waters? Thank you, Madam Moderator. What happens if the amendment passes in terms of access to the 2 waterfront facilities? So if they don't get the money, will people still be able to visit them over the next year?
Ms. Hodges? Mr. Whalen?
I think Mr. Whalen wants this one.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Chris Whalen, Town Manager. I live at 1935 Main Street. It's a good question. It's a good point to raise about the investments. One thing I will say is both investments in the White Pond and on the Giroux land relate to access. So the house has been removed from the Giroux property that was there, but now there's currently no access. There's no parking. So the investments that are being made, that have been proposed by Kate Hodges, relate to providing some access. The investments down the road in those properties will be optional. So the funds that you commit this year would not require you to invest in the parking lot or any other improvements. If you feel next year or in future years the community is not ready to invest any further, but at least we should have access to those two properties. And the White Pond was not something we were aware of a year ago when we were talking about creating a bathing beach at the Giroux property. I think that should be reconsidered now that we have a deep kettle hole pond at White Pond with good water. I don't think we should consider the investment of perhaps millions of dollars to create a swimming beach at the Giroux land or on Warner's Pond. But I think we do need to invest in the water quality. The question was, have we done a water quality analysis of the White Pond? And that has been done. The same firm, ESS, did a study of the White Pond water quality. They identified a number of things that we could do to mitigate the runoff that's coming down the embankments into the pond. And some of that work has already been started by the natural resources folks.
Thank you, Mr. Whalen. Seeing no one else is there someone, are you heading for a microphone, sir? You are. Oh, right. I'll just take this moment to note that as of 8:15, there were 881 voters here at town meeting.
Hi, Mike Phillips, 176 Partridge Lane.
Mr. Phillips.
Madam Moderator, since we're talking about dollar amounts, we throw a lot of big dollar amounts out, in this conversation. I know it's in the Finance Committee booklet, but could you help clarify for everyone here what a $1.4 million spend is on a taxable basis for the median household? I believe it's a couple $100, so I just would like to kind of put it in context as we talk about these numbers, what it means to the each and every household within Concord. Thank you.
Thank you. I see the town treasurer approaching the microphone.
So on page 18 in the Finance Committee report, there is a chart that shows the estimated impact on town meeting spending on your tax bill. So a $1.4 million project, the way that we finance the projects, that would result in debt service of about $250,000 a year. And that is $34.18 on the median household tax bill, and the median household assessed value is $881,550.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I think we are ready for a vote on the amendment. So what we are voting on right now is the amendment that is on the screen to reduce the amount for appropriated for item number 2, park improvements, from 1.4 million to 0 in Article 7. And again, this vote requires a majority for passage. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your ballot. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your ballot. Okay, so I see that the amendment fails by a substantial margin, and I do so declare. We'll now return to the main motion, and I see Mr. Perry approaching the microphone. Mr. Perry.
I'm Ned Perry at 362 Bedford Street. I'm rising to make a motion to amend item 6 of Article 7 to 0 and changing the resulting total for the article to $3,400,000 so that it reads line 6 would be human resources, library, furniture, and equipment 0. And the total would be $3,400,000 as the amendment is shown on the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Do we have a second for Mr. Perry's motion? I see that we do. Mr. Perry, would you want to stay there, or would you like to come here to address your amendment?
I'm comfortable here if I can have the 3 minutes you told me that I would have.
You may have it.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Tonight, we are considering a number of municipal capital projects, but it is far from clear that the project in item 6 is an appropriate municipal capital project. I thank Jeff Adams and John Boyden for their good presentations on the additional programs and spaces proposed for the main library, which is owned by the Concord Free Public Library Corporation, not the town. It has been my observation in numerous discussions with town committees, the representatives of the corporation have been a bit tone deaf. What we didn't hear from Jeff's and John's presentations were answers to the many concerns of many citizens about resulting future costs driving up taxes in our town. Many neighbors and friends are worrying about being able to continue to live here. Aren't you? I didn't hear about the increases in future costs related to the needing staffing of the more than 40% increase in the floor space. The town budget you just approved added a full-time social media technology coordinator at $57,000 and custodial services of $12,000 to the library annually, without a spade going into the ground yet for the addition. For the first time this evening, I did hear a little about additional heating and air conditioning costs, but there will be a 40% increase in the floor space that is required. The cost will be significantly higher due to the glass in the proposed modern design. I didn't hear about additional parking spaces that will be needed for the additional participants in the many new programs, nor ways to decrease traffic congestion around Concord Center. With one of the rooms housing 140 people for programming during the day, the parking space between the library and Emerson Umbrella is really for library, but Emerson Umbrella, having expanded, will be filling that space too. I don't know where additional parking is going to be. Nor did I hear anything about adding solar panels that might have been considered as part of our green culture. As a community, we have a goal of trying to achieve a net zero carbon footprint. However, this proposed addition takes us exactly in the opposite direction. This evening, for the first time, I have been handed an email which attempts to answer some of the questions I have previously raised about these green issues. Additionally, the $550,000 appears to be in conflict with the terms of the 2009 agreement between the town and the corporation, which states, and I quote, all capital, under library expenses and renovations, quote, all capital expenses, for example, equipment, furniture, and shelving, shall be borne by the corporation, unquote. It is unclear to me whether this $550,000 is a gift to the corporation or is intended for some proper capital expenditure. Let's ask the Library Corporation to seek funds from private donations in the Concord Museum, as the Concord Museum and Emerson Umbrella did. If the corporation is unable to raise the funds, the corporation could come back next year with a better design and with answers to these questions about the future tax burden associated with the corporation's glass structure. Please vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Kate, would anyone like to respond to the amendment on behalf of the town? Looks like not. Okay. We'll now open the floor to discussion and comment on this amendment. And again, the vote under the article requires a 2/3 vote, but the vote under the amendment for passage requires only a majority. And our discussion right now is not on the article as a whole and the other items that are seeking funding within the capital plan, but only the library project for furniture and fixtures. So the floor is open. Anybody has a question or a comment? I see that you have to go to a microphone. Well, got a second already, thanks. Yeah. Microphone number 3.
D. Ortner, 169 Thoreau Street.
Ms. Ortner.
And I do have a question. Mr. Perry has raised some excellent points, especially about timing. And I would like to hear from either of our previous speakers, Jeff or John, to talk about the timeline in terms of the construction of this project, and then also how furniture and equipment might fit into that, as well as the maintenance of the facility.
Okay, could we have Mr. Adams or Mr. Boynton respond to this question?
Thank you, John Boynton, 72 Chestnut Street.
Mr. Boynton.
In terms of the timing, the current plan calls for us to break ground this fall. We're currently targeting September. So the design has reached an advanced stage where we are basically working on our construction drawings right now. The construction process is expected to take 14 months. So we would expect to be finishing in the early part of 2021. And thus the costs that are anticipated in terms of cost increases would be phased in over that time. The town is responsible for operating the library, and thus, as the speaker pointed out, the costs would be borne by the town. We've worked closely with the library director to begin to plan these things, but ultimately they will be up to the town to decide. Based on our conversations with her, it sounds like the staffing related to the increased space would be an increase of about 1.5 FTEs, and that would come into being kind of in 2022 based on the timing. So the cost increases should be some ways out, and you might wonder why, if the square footage is increasing by 40%, why there are so few additional people required. One example is that though the children's library will be 50% larger, you don't need more people just to supervise that larger space. Another example is that the forum, which is essentially a programming space, doesn't require a staff person. And so there will be people who will be kind of wandering around, and the library director is comfortable that the FTE impact will be minimal. There will be costs on the operating side, utilities, cleaning as well. And these are estimated to be somewhere in the range of, I'm going to say $45,000 to $60,000 a year once the new facility is open. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Boynton. The con microphone right there.
Walter Burge, 1 Neshoba Road.
Mr. Burge.
Madam Moderator, I'd like to back us out and take just a little broader look at what's going on here. The corporation is not some mythical group with a deep purse. It's a group of people who have raised an awful lot of money to the benefit of the library and directly to the benefit of the town. The big library was renovated some years ago. The Fowler Library in West Concord was increased and desperately needed meeting space. All of that was done by heavy lifting fundraising by the corporation. And once again, they are working at raising somewhere in the vicinity of $8 or $9 million from private purses to benefit the town in lots and lots and lots of ways. I think it's mean-spirited, frankly, for us as citizens to say, well, you guys go out and do this thing and we're not going to help out. One cannot imagine the impact that the new children's spaces will have, for instance, on children here. You have a conflict that goes on where children come in to get a book, but they can't talk to their parents because there's a program going on. That will now stop. Teenagers are in the library all the time doing work together. It's difficult for them to do that. This is a great opportunity to benefit the town hugely, and the trustees will be contributing something in the variety of 90% of the cost. I urge your vote against this amendment.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Yes, I'm Sheldon Hines, 74 The Valley Road.
Mr. Hines?
The amendment, one of the comments on the amendment raised a legal question as to whether it is pursuant to the contract between the agreement between the town and the corporation as to whether furniture and equipment actually is allowed to be paid for by the town under that agreement, or if not, this I would agree that this sounds like a Would you agree, would someone agree that this sounds like a gift to the corporation rather than something that is pursuant to the spirit and actual wording of the agreement? This is a question I would like to have addressed by the town as well as by Mr. Boynton or the other gentleman. Thank you.
Are we ready to answer this? We'll hear from town council on this question.
Madam Moderator, Mina Macarius, Town Council. The answer is that the contract term that was referred to, and I'm assuming it was quoted correctly, is one that would not require the town to provide for capital costs, but it wouldn't prohibit it. The example of town and nonprofit jointly operated libraries is very common in Massachusetts, and this would be a capital expenditure for a public purpose. Public libraries are a public purpose. I also understand that we have consulted with bond counsel, who has reviewed the ability to borrow for this purpose as a capital project, and they have said that it is okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That answers it.
Con microphone right here.
Rick Briggs, 253 Elm Street.
Mr. Briggs.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I am a trustee of the corporation and also the treasurer of the corporation. I'm speaking against the proposed amendment. First, to reiterate a point that John Boynton and Jeff Adams made. In lining up our fundraising plan for this project, our first stop was to talk to Chris Whalen and the then members of the select board. And also as we lined up our fundraising to also make sure that the amount we were asking for was within our historic norms. As John pointed out in the slides, the 12% figure that you all saw is exactly lines up with what we've done before. So this project, $550,000 for the furniture and equipment, as well as $500,000 for the historic preservation of the Hedward Benjamin House under the CPA Act. The support of the town manager and the select board has always been consistently positive, and that's almost a 6-year period that we've been working on this now. So, as to the fundraising, to follow up on Mr. Burge's points, in addition to believing that the library project has very strong merits that will benefit every member of the Concord community, the trustees would also like to share how important it is for our leadership donors to hear that the town, and therefore all of us as taxpayers, support the project financially. We are blessed in Concord to have so many generous people with the financial resources to support the worthy civic projects with leadership level donations. Whether it is the library or, as it's pointed out, the museum or the umbrella or many other projects, there is a small contingent of people in Concord who will support projects like this with donations ranging from $10,000 to up to over $1 million. And sometimes really huge amounts. They are amazing and wonderful people, and we all should be grateful that they want to help make Concord a better place. In our meetings with prospective leadership donors, they always ask where we intend to find the funds. They clearly understand that the vast majority will be raised from Concord families like them. They also find it very compelling that the town and its taxpayers will help support the project.
Mr. Briggs, are you ready to wrap up?
One more sentence. This appeals to a sense of fairness that a major project for our iconic town library that offers something for everyone to use and enjoy, and always for free, will in fact be supported, at least in a small way, by everyone in the form of our taxes. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Jeff Adams, 142 Farmers Cliff Road. I would also add that contributions from the town towards the last 5 library renovation projects going back to the 1980s have been very consistent with this offer. At each project, the town has contributed to FF&E over the last 30 years.
Thank you very much. Con microphone over here.
Hi, my name is Tara Edelman. I live at 357 Nishotic Road.
Ms. Edelman?
I'm a member of the Town Library Committee and have been for several years now. In that role, I've had an opportunity to get to know how this project developed from the beginning. And it's my understanding that as part of the long-range planning process that occurred several years ago now, the library committee, working with the corporation and the Friends of the Library, engaged in a public consultation process during which they asked the community what they'd like to see from the library. And that this project was designed to deliver not what the corporation would like to deliver to the community, but what the community asked for. And by raising the funds for this project, the corporation is giving a gift on behalf of the contributors to the community to serve the needs of the community. So it seems appropriate that we should give some donation from our taxes in order to see this project completed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pro microphone over here.
Ralph Reichley, 259 Independence Road. I just moved to vote on this amendment.
I'm gonna let's see. Well, we've been discussing this for about 14 minutes, and I know you have one more point, Mr. Perry, but this is the motion to call the question requires a second. Do I see a second? I do. This is not a debatable motion. It requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of a vote on the question now? Thank you very much. All those opposed? Well, that carries by an overwhelming majority, and so we'll now proceed to a vote on the amendment. And once again, we're not voting on the article yet. We'll get there eventually. We are voting on the amendment, and what's required to pass the amendment is a majority vote. All those in favor of the amendment on the screen to reduce the item number 6 in Article 7 from $550,000 to 0, library furniture and equipment. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your ballots. Okay, all those opposed. Okay, the motion fails, and I do so declare. All right. We're now going to go back to talking about Article 7 itself. Are there any more comments or questions? Pro microphone over here.
Thank you very much. Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road.
Ms. Proctor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm speaking for the League of Women Voters of Concord and Carlisle. And I want to note that we take no position on this particular item, which, if we can remember back, is Article number 7. Specifically, the League respects the thoughtful and ambitions of the town in its many ways in which it wants to expand and improve the facilities and work of our town. But we urge the town and the schools to establish in 2019 a collaborative and comprehensive fiscal planning committee for long-term capital spending to study and plan our needs, our costs, and our financially prudent timing for large projects currently foreseen, considering the impact and tax burden on all town citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Proctor. Anyone else? A question or a comment on Article 7? Okay, I see someone making her way to a microphone. Microphone number 4.
Madam Moderator, Sarah Satterthwaite, 297 Losbrook Road.
Yes, please.
Mr.
Proceed.
Perry raised an interesting question I hadn't thought about the parking impacts. And I know that we have long-range planning activities, and it would be nice if someone could just speak to how this motion here thoughtfully has been working with people who are thinking about that for the town, if that's been happening.
Okay, so your question is specifically with respect to item 6 on the library project, wondering whether people have thought about the parking plan. Ms. Hodges?
The parking plan, the parking management plan, there's a plan between the Emerson Umbrella and the Library Corporation where the special permit that the umbrella has will be tied to a parking agreement. And so right now we're in negotiations with the Emerson umbrella that's on the town side to amend that. So yes, we are thinking about it.
Okay. Thank you very much. If you lost your cell phone at check-in, I got it right here. So come on up and we'll give you your cell phone back. Okay. It'll be over here. Okay. Pro microphone.
Hi, I'm Ann Urzuleg at 39 Cottage Street.
Yes, ma'am.
And I am, thank you, I am a member of the library, Friends of the Library Committee, and I just wanted to say on behalf of the Friends of the Library, the importance that we see that this library expansion will bring to our town, a great opportunity for more programming, but also for the programming that already exists to continue to happen without interfering so much with the people who are there to read the books or get to the periodicals, and instead of sort of waiting till poetry is over or the toddler sing-along is over, it'll be part of something that you'll be able to just get to those materials already. So I totally urge you to vote yes on Article 7.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Dee Ortner, 169 Thoreau Street. I just have a comment about the parking. It's not just the library. It will also be for the swimming facilities or the park facilities we have at Giroux and also White Pond. And I'd like to just suggest that the town really look forward to electric buses that could be used to shuttle people around to these various facilities in the upcoming years.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't encourage them, Ms. Ortner. Con microphone.
I'm Patrick Everett, 15 Stowe Street.
Yes, sir.
I live right across the street from the library, and the parking is extremely difficult right now when the large auditorium that is going to be active in the umbrella is going to be even worse. I would like to see this project. By the way, I think it's a wonderful public library and handled very well. But I would like to see this whole project perhaps saved until we do have some transport around the town. It would be great if people could get there on an electric bus or something. But right now, it's just going to be impossible for parking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pro microphone.
Pam Swing, 54 Francis Street.
Yes, Ms. Swing.
Why not have composting toilets at White Pond also?
So that's a question. Ms. Hodges, do you want to tell us about composting toilets?
Absolutely. Composting toilets are great, but they need to be maintained regularly. And while White Pond would be fully operational and being used, during the good weather months, they won't likely be open and used during the non-summer months. And so it can lead to a lot of issues with the compost material and with the stuff that's underneath. And so what we would effectively need to do is remove what's effectively composting the waste underneath. If you want me to go into more detail, I can, but.
Thank you. All right, seeing no one else at a microphone, I think we're ready for a vote on Article 7, and I will remind you this is a bonding issue and it therefore requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of Article 7, appropriation of funds for the municipal capital projects, thank you very much. All those opposed? Okay, I see that the motion carries by well more than a 2/3 vote, and I do so declare. We'll next proceed to Article number 8, which is the authorization of expenditures under the revolving funds under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half, and that motion is on the screen. It is moved as printed in the warrant. Do we have a second for the motion under Article 8? I see that we do. Thank you very much. And we'll hear from Ms. LaFleur.
This article seeks to establish annual spending limits for certain revolving funds. Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half requires that annual spending limits be set by town meeting for certain revolving funds. Revolving funds authorized under other sections of Mass General Law, such as the Recreational Revolving Fund, do not require annual appropriation. This article seeks to establish annual spending limits for the following 4 funds: Regional Housing Services, $265,000, Road Repair, $120,000, Senior Services, $45,000, and Tree Preservation, $100,000. Fund receipts come in the form of fees, fines, and donations. Spending goes to supplement existing departmental programs and services, including pavement preservation activities, day trips and other recreational services for seniors, and services performed through our Regional Housing Services Office, such as consultation on proposed housing projects, reconciliation of the subsidized housing inventory, and other monitoring of existing affordable housing units. We request your support of this article, which seeks to establish annual spending limits for these 4 revolving funds as required by Mass General Law.
Thank you very much. Both the Select Board and the Finance Committee recommend affirmative action on Article 8. Are there any questions or comments from the floor on Article 8? Seeing none, it appears that we are ready for a vote on Article 8. This is a majority vote. All those in favor of the authorization of expenditure of revolving funds under General Laws 44, Section 53E and a half. Thank you very much. All those opposed. That passes by a near unanimous vote, and I do so declare. We're now ready for Article 9. We'll hear again from Ms. LaFleur. The motion for Article 9 is again on the screen. It is moved as printed in the warrant. This is the creation of a trust fund for OPEB liability benefits. And do we have a second for this motion? I see that we do. Thank you. Ms. LaFleur.
This article seeks town meeting authorization to establish a new Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund, or OPEB Trust Fund, in accordance with Mass General Law. The term OPEB is a broad term covering retirement benefits other than pension, like health insurance. The town of Concord was one of the first communities in the Commonwealth to establish an OPEB Trust Fund. In 2008, the state legislature adopted a special act granting the town permission to establish this fund prior to there being specific statutory authority. Shortly thereafter, the legislature enacted a new law allowing all communities to establish OPEB trust funds. As the town had already had its own special legislation, there was no need to reestablish this fund under the new general law. However, in 2016, the legislature revised the general law, and based upon feedback from town council, the Department of Revenue, and the town's auditor, it seemed most prudent to update the trust fund's legal structure through the adoption of Mass General Law, Chapter 32B, Section 20. Adoption of this section will make it clear that the fund is irrevocable and that all monies held in trust are for the sole purpose of satisfying the town's OPEB liability. As of June 30, 2018, the date of the last valuation, the fund had $18 million and the liability was 32% funded. The town's unfunded liability is $34.5 million. The town is on a closed-loop funding schedule and intends to have this liability fully funded by 2040. The chart shown on this slide is a comparison of Concord's unfunded liability to other AAA-rated communities in Massachusetts. In adopting this law, the town, through its town meeting, must also decide whether to appoint a sole trustee or a board of trustees to oversee the fund. If a sole trustee is appointed, the law prescribes that it must be the town treasurer. If a board of trustees is appointed, the law prescribes that one of two options be chosen, as shown on the slide. The recommendation being made is to appoint a sole trustee, the town treasurer, who will consult with the trustees of town donations and existing board and have a formal reporting requirement to the select board. This option is being recommended because monies in the trust fund are assets of the town, not the retirement system, and should be overseen by the town. And creating a new board when a standing committee with a similar charge and identical expertise already exists seemed unnecessary. In formulating this recommendation, the Financial Audit Advisory Committee, Select Board, and trustees of town donations were all consulted and all felt that the trustees of town donations best fit this role. We request your support of this article, which seeks town meeting authorization to establish a new OPEB trust fund in accordance with existing general law.
Thank you very much. I will note that both the Select Board and the Finance Committee recommend affirmative action on Article 9. We'll now open the floor to questions and comments about Article 9. Carrie, looks like that was an excellent presentation and explanation of what we're doing under Article 9, and we're ready for a vote. This is a majority vote. All those in favor of accepting the provisions of the statute to establish the OPEB Liability Trust Fund, thank you. All those opposed? Okay, that vote passes by an overwhelming majority, and I do so declare. We're now ready for Article 10, and we'll hear from our very dedicated and long-suffering representative on the Minuteman Regional Technical High School School Board.
This is the last time I will be making a presentation at town meeting on behalf of Minuteman. But serving on the Minuteman School Committee has been a rewarding experience during this very significant period of redefinition for the district, of which Concord has been a member since the very beginning. The goals we have set for ourselves are intended to serve the needs of our students, local workforce development, and the interests of our member communities. Of course, that begins with our teachers. Minuteman students alternate weeks between academic classes and instruction in the technical field of their choice. While academic courses cover standard principles, the specific curricula are designed to align with differing learning styles and relate to the student's technical field. Performance on standard tests provide strong evidence that this approach works. State-of-the-art equipment and safe practices are a given, but students also develop strong relationships with their peers, faculty, and advisors, all of whom are there to support them through their time at Minuteman and beyond. Minuteman graduates leave with certifications qualifying them for immediate employment, but over 60% of them will go on to college. The new building remains on budget and on schedule to open its doors to students in September. But take a look at this list of other recent accomplishments. That last item, by the way, means that our post-grad programs will be stepping up a couple of notches. These are tuition-based and will become eligible for financial aid and student loans. While enrollment from our current 10-member towns remains relatively steady, changes in state regulations that determine eligibility have caused a steep decline in the number of students tuitioned and attending from outside the district. Those are the green bars. You can also see that the 6 towns that recently withdrew from the district and are yellow here had been sending a small number of students all along. Despite eliminating 15 teaching positions and making other cuts where there was flexibility to do so, the per-student cost was rising even before expense for the new building kicked in. We have taken steps to address this. Interest in the building and our revitalized programs in traditional trades, engineering, and biotech have already attracted a record number of applications that could fill the new building to capacity within a very few years. Parent representatives network with other Minuteman families and are available to talk with parents of prospective students. Lisa Williams has been selected to fill that role for Concord. The superintendent is taking the lead on this one. However, we believe that the most effective step in terms of both governance and budget will be to welcome one or more new towns to the district, and Watertown is very seriously considering just such a move. Here is our enrollment, Concord's enrollment at Minuteman. Note that a major factor in our annual assessment is a rolling 4-year average of these numbers, which when I started on the committee was back around 7 and 11, is now 25. And here is the effect in terms of our share of the assessment. Do I have it in the right place? I think so. Yes, and here's the effect. Okay, forgive me. After a few years of budget cuts, debt service on the new building is coming into its peak years. All member communities will be paying more next year. Maintenance and utility costs will be down, and there will be further changes in staffing, but increases in compensation for teachers, insurance, and retirement will all increase. Chapter 78 is anticipated to be up, but with a smaller district, transportation aid is declining. And with fewer out-of-district students, tuition paid by other towns is falling as well. A capital fee will be added to that tuition beginning in fiscal year 20. However, the proceeds will be applied to debt payments in the subsequent year. The bottom line is that our assessment of $1,073,368 is up just shy of 45%, driven in part by the larger number of students choosing Minuteman, and in part by our share of the new building costs. I also want to recognize Frank Cannon, Alice Kaufman, and Carmen, before she became our moderator, for their service on Minuteman's building committee. The result of their work has been nothing short of extraordinary. Thank you for your attention and for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Flood. Do we have a second for the motion under Article 10? I see that we do. Thank you very much. Both the Select Board and the Finance Committee recommend affirmative action on Article 10, and we'll now open the floor for questions and comments. You're at the accessible microphone, which is why it's at your waist. You can sit in a chair if you like.
I can reach it. Thank you.
Okay.
Charlie Blair, 26 Florio Drive.
Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I do have a question. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Carrie Flood for all her years of doing this. It's been fantastic.
Another exception to the no clapping rule. Thank you.
However, I do have a question for her. The only thing that you can, any of the figures that you can get from the state as far as Minuteman or any of the schools as far as salaries and per pupil costs usually run behind what they are. And right now it's like year 17, FY17. And I noticed in FY17 for Minuteman, the per pupil cost was in the neighborhood of $35,000 to $36,000 per student. And we have in Concord, our school committee and our finance committee really keep the schools in Concord, their salaries and everything, and per pupil costs under control. And we were in the low 20s. And I'm just wondering why it happens to be that Minuteman is the highest in the state.
Ms. Flood?
Factors going on. First of all, it has been an extremely expensive building to maintain, the existing building. That will go away. Number two, the teacher salaries, if we're comparing to other voc techs, The teacher salaries have to be more similar to the teaching in academic programs in this geographic area where the cost of living and housing is extremely high. And we've done in our negotiations with the teachers on union, we have done those kind of comparisons and find that we are comparable, we are not higher. We also have, and this is probably the most important factor in the expense, is the, if you're comparing to other vocational technical schools, all voc techs have equipment costs for their technical programs as well as the academic programs. But Minuteman has the highest percentage of students on some level of IEP. That's a good thing in terms of relieving the local school systems who are our members, bringing those kids to Minuteman where they're learning in the way that is most comfortable for them. Reduces the cost to the sending district, but it greatly increases the cost to Minuteman. And we have looked at the ratio that we have at Minuteman versus other districts and found that ours is the highest in the state, averaging 50% per year students on some level of IEP.
Ms. Flood, would you explain for those people who may not know what an IEP is?
Independent or individual education plan, the specific accommodations that are made for a student to succeed to their highest ability within their educational setting.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
Okay, seeing no more questions and comments, it appears that we are ready for a vote on Article 10. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor of Article 10, the Minuteman Technical High School District budget, thank you very much. All those opposed? And I see that that vote carries by well more than a majority, and I do so declare. Now, I have a motion from the school committee. You want to make a motion? Go
Alexa
right ahead.
Anderson, 14 Park Lane.
Yes.
As a point of order, I was wondering if we could move to take Article 14 out of order.
So we have I think what you want to do is make a motion to take Article 14 now out of order ahead of Article 11.
Correct.
And so that's a motion. Do we have a second for that motion? I see that we do. I see that we have a couple of seconds. All right, so this is a debatable and amendable motion, requires a majority vote. Does anyone want to speak to this motion? No. Okay. Looks like we're ready for a vote on the motion to take Article 14 out of order and to take it up now. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? Looks like that passes. We'll now proceed to Article 14, and we will hear from Superintendent Hunter.
Thank you. Good evening. We appreciate the time tonight, and I must start any discussion of the schools with a great level of gratitude and appreciation. We are highly supported, and I feel very privileged every day to come here and serve this community and your children. So in talking on the middle schools, we're going to just do a technology check here.
While we're doing the technology check, do we have a second for the motion under Article 14? I see that we do. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. Our middle school buildings, for those of you who don't know, we operate our middle school out of two separate facilities. We are at a really critical stage in the life of these two schools and the impact. Both buildings are obsolete and deteriorating, and we're now to the point of believing that extending that life comes at a greater cost than if we were to consider building new. So we want to talk you through that tonight and then give you a chance to voice your opinion. So our request tonight We're requesting $1.5 million to cover costs of a feasibility study and schematic design work. The feasibility study comes with guidance to look at the site, look at the options, look at the educational programming, and that's at a cost of $400,000. The schematic design is to give us a beginning design that would lead us to be able to identify associated costs of construction, establish the scope, the budget, and a schedule, and that's a cost of $500,000. You can see some of the outlined pieces of what would be included in those two components. They do need to happen simultaneously as one informs the other. The owner's project manager is another piece of the $1.5 million. About $300,000 of that would go to hire a professional who then runs the entire project on behalf of the building committee that would form under the direction of the town manager and select board. How did we get here? Just a little bit of history. Should this be a new discussion for you? It's certainly not a new discussion for those of us in the schools and the school committee. Sanborn is 55 years old, Peabody is 49 years old, and we're simply at the end of the life of a building. That's a very typical number to use in school building and build for the life of 50 years. That's what this building was designed for. Just a little bit of point of order to be sure you're noticing. Sanborn was opened as a junior high. Peabody was actually opened as an elementary school, and it was the day and age of open concept elementary schools. So we've as a town have done nothing but retrofit walls and try to put dividers in and try to make it something even close to a more typical environment. Certainly not a middle school environment, but something more close to a traditional classroom setting. We do have mods on Sanborn to appease our overcrowded situation despite all of that. In 2016, the Middle School Facilities Planning Committee was formed under the direction of the school committee. 15 community members met monthly. At that point, town meeting appropriated funds to work with an architect to look at the life of the buildings before great investment was put into them. And that is what we resulted in the findings that really helped to document the fact that great investment may not make the most sense. The two campus configuration was also found to be expensive. We have redundancies there, inefficient. There's a great challenge in trying to have a cohesive middle school that runs under two different sites. Never mind two different time zones. That's a whole nother story if you don't know it. And so our current conditions, and we'll highlight these because we could do a whole presentation on these. Pipes, septic, roofs, we just have constant and chronic repairs that need to be done. We never know what's coming next. We also have to look at our operational costs, which because of the redundancies, we're spending about $500,000 a year in what we think could be reduced should we be in one school. Another presentation for another day is the educational potential. We're highly limited by the buildings and the facilities that don't allow us to collaborate and have connections for kids and some really hands-on environments, very much limiting. So the architects that looked at all of this projected that we would need $34 to $47 million to even remain in the buildings for 10 years because we would have no choice but to begin to replace major infrastructure costs. They considered a number of options. We won't get into all of these tonight. That'll be the charge of the building committee should we go forward. Included in the options was a new school or reconfiguration and additions to Sanborn. A little bit more of the history. We've been trying desperately to work with the Massachusetts School Building Authority and receive subsidy for this project. We've applied twice and been denied. Part of why we're here tonight is because we're very pessimistic that that is a viable source of subsidy for us at this point, and we felt we needed to bring it forward. We can give you a little bit of the rates and the levels there. About 17% of schools annually are accepted. There's usually 70 to 80 districts applying and 12 to 15 apply. 15 receive the award. So we're skeptical that that's going to happen for us going forward. I've talked a little bit about the options. The two remaining options on the table would be to look at renovations and the new building projects. The school committee considered both of those very carefully. When you really do the math based on what we got for information from the architecture firm, it becomes a discussion of penny saving now and the long view. So in looking at new buildings, we're expecting that we would be on par with a $90 million school most likely, and I'm going to talk in a minute on the high rate of construction costs that continue to increase exponentially versus a renovation, which we think in today's dollars would be about $80 million. So the school committee made a decision to recommend a new school. Now, the building committee will need to talk more on that recommendation, but that is the school committee's recommendation that we would like to continue to discuss and get plans to go forward and bring that option to this group a year to 18 months from now. So a little bit in terms of the math, average middle school construction costs currently are $648 per square foot. The Feingold architecture firm recommended 125,000 square feet approximately. We are now, when we look at the actual costs of construction, looking at almost 7% annually based on what MSBA has funded. So that turns into a cost of waiting. If we wait any longer and take our chances on MSBA, we start to see that it adds up. We expect a total cost of waiting to be a little over $3 to a little over $8 million per year. If we do wait for MSBA, we have to apply again and then go through a whole planning process with them. So we're at least 2 years out. So we anticipate that could double those anticipated costs of waiting. Tax impact is always the question we get. Should it be a $90 million school, which we do not know that for sure right now because we do not have a design to work off of. If we were to run the numbers based on those conditions, the peak year would be a little over $1,000 per year. Yearly average would be $764. Again, the cost of waiting exponentially increases based on the research that we've been doing the last number of months and years prior. Now we can start to wonder if the subsidy starts to get negated by those increasing costs, because on top of the cost of waiting with construction costs increasing, plus our annual operating implications of $500,000 per year, plus the great mitigating risk factors of some infrastructure failing at any given moment, we start to be up into the millions of dollars fairly quickly. So going forward with the recommendation, let me just highlight a couple of words there. The committee believes it's the most cost-effective and responsible plan, and that's why we're here tonight. Our next steps would be to fund the $1.5 million. That's what you're being asked to consider tonight for those components. And then a building committee would form, a project manager be hired, and all of that would need to be brought back to a town meeting for discussion of funding the actual construction of the project. So you can see a slide there to outline that. Industry standard is that this all needs to be done together. One informs the other. MSBA requires that now. The law has changed because doing one without the other becomes a lack of information along the way. You might find something in the feasibility study that if you're not doing schematic design at the same time, produces misinformation. So we feel pretty strongly that tonight we need to ask you to consider funding this $1.5 million to allow us to plan and bring you better numbers and better information under the school building committee that would be formed under direction of the town manager and the select board. The school committee would have a seat at the table, but would certainly not be the owners of that project. And we hope you'll consider that tonight. I'm going to invite Heather Bow to the school committee up. They have a minute or two to share their position on why they would like to go forward.
Thank you, Superintendent Hunter.
Under 10 minutes.
Yeah, you did it. I'm impressed. That's a lot to cover. Hi, Heather Bow, 33 Alden Road, member of the Concord School Committee and also chair of the CMS Facilities Planning Committee.
Ms. Bow.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So first, I want to quickly first extend a thanks to all who have joined. Oh, whoops, that's right. I'm in charge of these. That's okay. I got it. I want to first extend a thanks to all of those we have seen out at information sessions, meetings, and tours about the middle school over the past few months and even years. We've heard so much valuable feedback and some very important questions. And what I wanted to do is focus on a couple of those themes that have come up the most in our discussions and question sessions over the past couple of months. First, the tax burden. And I will say it out loud. We realize this is a burden that we're talking about. We know that. We feel it too. Unfortunately, any alternatives really only create a heavier burden. And that's the challenge that we're talking about here. Each year that we wait, the tax impact just increases. And to try to extend the life of the current buildings would actually take significant investment right now, plus further investment down the line, only a few years out. It just doesn't make any sense. Although it may feel counterintuitive, the best way to minimize the burden on taxpayers is actually to move forward right now. Just to review a little why that is, Lori went through some of these numbers, but obviously there's not a lot of time to cover it. To review, the building cost increases at anywhere from $3 to more likely up to $8 million each year that we wait. We're also throwing away well over $500,000 every year on redundancies, maintenance, and energy inefficiency. We can stem that flow when we move into a new building, but the longer we wait, the more we spend. Why the 1.5? This has certainly been brought up as a question. There are the feasibility study and schematic design, which are considered modules 3 and 4 in the MSBA process, are always contracted together. That's per MSBA regulations. This provides the opportunity for environmental assessments that inform both steps. They're really integral to each other. It also provides better information and more accurate estimates so that we can get to a cost estimate for a building that we can really all count on. It allows the town to authorize building plans with confidence. To provide for less would really limit our ability to do thorough and comprehensive planning here. It's essential that we do this right, and that's what we're talking about. In closing, I just want to highlight that we are Concord, and as we've seen in the Envision Concord survey, and throughout our history in town here, we value education. We need to support it, and we hope that you'll join us in doing that in what we feel is the most efficient and responsible way now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bow. Well, you almost broke even there, one of you under and the other over. We'll now hear from Mr. McCain on behalf of the Select Board.
Tom McCain, 138 Nishotic Road, speaking for the Select Board.
Mr. McCain.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Select Board urges unanimous favorable action on Article 14. This article authorizes the Treasury to borrow up to $1.5 million for a feasibility study to consider construction of a new middle school at the existing Sanborn site. Since its original proposal, Article 14 has been altered to have the funds be expended under the direction of the town manager, not the school committee. And the Select Board has already begun the process of setting up a Concord Middle School Building Committee with discussions of drafting the charge and membership composition for such a committee. This will allow early community engagement, and it'll grant the committee authority on all design decisions and will make recommendations to the town manager on financial, contractual, and schedule matters. The article does not preclude possible partial funding from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And at the Select Board meeting on April 1st, the board voted to approve the application of the Concord Middle School Statement of Interest to the MSBA. The passage of this article will allow for a prompt and well-considered proposal for middle school to educate Concord students in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. The article is contingent upon passage of a Proposition 2.5 debt extension referendum. Thus, if the article receives a 2/3 required vote, the Select Board will have to call a special municipal election for the purpose of posing the question to the voters of the town. The scheduling of the election is likely to occur at the board's first business meeting after town meeting on Monday, April 22nd. The town clerk needs a minimum of 35 days to plan the election from the date of the Select Board call. The Select Board calls one, and that would put the election from June 1 to June 15 timeframe. Favorable action is recommended by the Select Board on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. And we'll now hear from Mr. Swain. on behalf of the Finance Committee, who will be speaking and I also believe offering an amendment.
Good evening, Madam Moderator. Philip Swain, 114 Pine Hill Lane.
Mr. Swain.
Member of the Finance Committee and speaking on behalf of the Finance Committee. We are moving to amend the motion under Article 15 to reduce the amount being allocated from 1.5 million to 750,000. Which one? Can you, next slide, please. Now, the Finance Committee first wants to begin by commending the school administration and the school committee for their efforts in reducing the school budgets this year. And the operating budgets we'll hear tomorrow night have been reduced substantially, and we appreciate that. And FinCom would also, I think I speak for everyone on FinCom, that we would love to see the town build a brand new middle school as soon as practical. But we're concerned about the amount the schools have proposed to pay for this feasibility study, especially if the study has to be redone if we are accepted by the MSBA. And let me emphasize that. That wasn't mentioned before. If we are accepted by the MSBA this coming year or in a future year, we'll have to redo the feasibility study. We're also concerned about the impact that a $1.5 million study and even more importantly, a $90 million middle school would have on our town's debt burden. So we've come up with this compromise proposal, which will allow the middle school project to continue. Next slide, please. But we think the proposed amount that we're suggesting, $750,000, is reasonable because it's comparable to what other towns have paid for feasibility and schematic design phase contracts that have been recently entered into. A good example is the town of Leicester. Recently, they allocated $750,000 to this phase, and in January, they signed a contract with Feingold Alexander Architects and NV5 Consultants to perform a feasibility study for $650,000. This would be the same kind of thing that we'd be doing. And Feingold Alexander was the architect that Ms. Hunter mentioned did the feasibility or did the previous study for the Concord Middle School. There's some materials about that contract in your handout from Leicester. There's also some materials about a similar contract for Framingham, which is also building a new middle school, and they recently entered into a contract for $695,000. Can you go to the next slide? But this slide is probably my first main point of the night. This slide compares the cost of all recent middle school feasibility studies since 2014 in the state. MSBA actually makes this available, so you can look at them. And what you see on the slide is the red line is the proposed cost for the schools are asking for $1.5 million. All of the other studies have a median average of $750,000, which is the amount we're proposing. So we think if you look at this, we think the $750,000 is something that can be worked with and other towns have been working with and have been able to perform their feasibility studies. We could get that for the going rate. Next slide, please. Our other concern is the impact that the study itself, $1.5 million is nothing small, and more importantly, the building will have on our town debt. We have already been very generous in supporting the schools with new construction over the last decade. We have a new high school, a new Willard School, and a new bus depot, among others, that we've supported. And there's a list in your handout of all the other projects that we've supported and we are still paying for. So because of that, we now have $66 million in debt that we are paying down already. And besides the school debt of $66 million, we have several important town and municipal capital projects coming up. that we will have to pay for in the next few years. Those add up to $65 million more in borrowing, and that would include a new public works facility, a new police and fire station, and other municipal facilities. Now, those numbers, by the way, the 65 million is an estimate. It's not based on any architect or professional study yet, but those are real numbers that we're going to have to face. Next slide, please. So here's my other main point, what I call our mountain of debt. You can see our existing debt is what's peaking in the middle at the black line. The red is the debt that we'd add with the schools, and the other colors on the right-hand side on top of the mountain are the town and municipal debt. But you can see how much higher the mountain is getting if we don't do something. Next slide, please. So we don't think we should overpay for the feasibility study. Our proposal would allow us to get a competitive price with a modest budget. Next slide, please. And finally, if you're concerned about the median amount not being enough to pay for this, or reducing somehow what we can do, this study phase will take 12 to 24 months. If the schools or the school building committee needs more money, they can come back to town meeting in a year. These bills are paid on a monthly basis, and ask for more money if they need it. But at least this allows us to commission a study to get the project started. Next slide. Oh, next slide after that. So we ask that you support our motion to amend to $750,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swain. Do we have a second for the motion to amend? I see that we do. Okay. So once again, the main motion for the appropriation of funds and the borrowing and the Proposition 2.5 exclusion under Article 14 requires a 2/3 vote, but the amendment requires a majority vote in order to pass. And we will now turn our attention to discussing the amendment. And I think first we may hear from the superintendent who wishes to make, actually we're going to hear from Ms. Bout, who wishes to speak to the amendment.
I'm back again. Thank you. Heather Bout, 33 Alden Road.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So I'd like to address this amendment in particular. Am I in charge again? Either way, I got it. First, I'd like to point out that the school committee is opposed to this amendment because we think it is actually not in our best financial interest. Let me explain. There are two, and actually this went too far. There we go. There are two things that could happen if we cut the funding in half here. One is we split the two main elements and we only do the feasibility study. The second is we try to do both at a lower price. We can look at both options. I'm going to go very quickly through the first one since that wasn't too much part of the discussion here. As we've talked about, feasibility study and schematic design are typically executed and contracted together. It's the way the MSBA does it. In fact, they require it. It's so that you can get an accurate cost estimate and fulfill all of your study needs. I'm not going to go into the details of all these. The basic message is that initial investment in research can save you significant money in the long term. We'll leave it at that. Those are all the ramifications of splitting them, which basically means it's going to cost us more money. So let's get to the second option, which is what Mr. Swain was talking about. Trying to budget $750,000 for both of these would mean a couple of possibilities. One, we shortchange our due diligence, which I really don't think is an option. The second is what ends up often happening in Massachusetts school building projects. You end up covering the necessary costs later. So this is a list of several other school districts from the MSBA website who have gone through this process. Some of them are the same that you just saw, some are different. I think Natick was also on the last slides. As an example, what happens is that the number on the MSBA website is what was authorized for the feasibility study and design. What often happens is that further studies are necessary. Those further studies are still completed, but they're put into later funding stages, and they're not reflected in the online records of what was authorized for feasibility study and design. So this is just an example of a few towns, what their authorized amount was and what their total spend was in the end. To give some more detail behind that, we'll take Natick as an example. The $750,000 covered just the feasibility and schematic design. There were other environmental and site studies that happened that were covered separately. So their total was over $1 million. You see this in many places. There it is in Beverly. There it is in Situate. I could go on and on. I won't go into the details, but this happens very regularly. These numbers, by the way, in Situate look lower because of the fact that it was 5 years ago. There's a lot of escalation going on here. So really what we need to look at is what happens if we cut down our budget. We've talked to many industry professionals. One of the most interesting quotes was, if you try to cover everything for $750,000, the contracting firms would need a commitment to cover the rest of the cost in the next steps. Either that or you just settle for less service. Our goal here is transparency. We want to be very clear about what it is that we're asking for. We don't want to just agree to a certain amount and then slide in extra costs later. For that reason, this is what we're asking for. Just as a reminder, it is a not to exceed, so it's up to $1.5 million. We would negotiate the fees and, if possible, bring them in even lower. Again, the tax impact to the median household on this one would be about $28.74 next year. And that's about it. We'll come back to the addendum later if we need it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're turning our attention now to this amendment. I see various people rising. Let's start with microphone number 3.
Thank you, Madam. My name is Bob Lawson, 90 Lee Drive.
Mr. Lawson.
I have this suspicion that there's going to be another amendment on this article, and it's going to be concerning making this school project a net zero building. And I wonder how that factors into this. It seems like that's taking it to another level, and more planning would be necessary to incorporate that, which I hope we will be doing later tonight with that amendment. But I don't know if Leicester and some of these other towns that were brought up here had those considerations, which I hope we will have.
Thank you very much. Pro microphone.
Miguel Echevarri, 255 Commonwealth Ave.
Mr. Echevarri.
I have a question, and then I also would like to make a comment, and the question is the guy behind me.
So go ahead and say your question.
So the question is, with regards to the slide that showed all of the projects, the middle school projects and the costs and such, my question on that was, did that include both the feasibility and the schematic design phases? And yes, that's my question on that. So there was a slide that showed all the schools.
Okay, so you're talking out of Mr. Swain's
Exactly.
presentation?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Swain, why don't you come up here and we can see, you tell us what slide we should pop back up.
Keep going. That one. So the question is the cost that he's showing here, does that include feasibility and schematic designs and or any other element of design?
Yes, this is the same thing that we're talking about paying $1.5 million for. So just so it's clear, these other towns were able to get into contracts with a designer who does the feasibility study and the graphic design, and an owner's project manager for the amount shown in this slide here. So $750,000 was the average for all of those, same as we're talking about here. And then just one other thing I want to point out. I made this slide in chronological order. So it was mentioned that there's a lot of escalation going on. There is in the cost of building schools. It is going up, according to the MSBA, by about 7% per year, but not the feasibility studies. It's interesting. I found this interesting, that the feasibility studies are pretty much clustering around the same numbers. This is from 2014 on, but you can see they're all the same. They're not going up. And Leicester was the most recent feasibility study, was able to do it for $650, not even at the median. And my other point in response to the recent comments was that if these other towns have added to their studies after they started, that's something that will be managed by the school building committee. They can come back to us. But let's start with a number that we can afford, and if we have to redo this for the MSBA, we won't have spent all that money.
Thank you, Mr. Swain. Mr. Echevarri, you had a comment as well?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Moderator. So anyways, let's keep in mind that what this is to do is to talk about the cost of the feasibility study. And right now, the original presentation, and actually any of the dialogue over the last 3 months, the school committee has not provided any backup information with regards to their $1.5 million. I've been tracking it, and I've been trying to ask questions, and they have not had any information, backing up information to support their $1.5 million claim. Now, if you look at what the Finance Committee has done, the Finance Committee has actually researched it, and they've actually benchmarked it. And the way that they came up with their figure was in that chart that you saw, that they did the research and they determined that $750,000 is an adequate, reasonable amount in order to perform this study. And it's not going to degrade any of the timetable involved. That's really the amount that the study should cost. So I plan to support the Finance Committee, who is here for the benefit of town meeting and for the voters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Con microphone here.
Dawn Guariello, 57 Bristers Hill Road.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. For the record, I'm a licensed architect in the state of Massachusetts. I've been designing public schools for 20 years here. I'm also on the State Architectural Access Board. So a little bit of background on me so you can understand my comments. In 2004, Mitt Romney put a moratorium on school design and completely revamped the whole process under MGL 70B. And that basically established the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority. It's become the standard for public school design. Most projects follow their process, whether they're under their grant program or not. It's worth noting that feasibility studies are, the fee is based on the estimated construction cost. And as everyone knows, there's often a range. And it's worth noting that the MSBA is fully transparent, and their historic data has designer fees for feasibility at 1.15% of construction cost, estimated construction cost, and OPM fees at 0.35%. To the point of the Finance Committee, as far as Leicester is concerned, they advertised at $44 to $72 million. That's straight out of their packet. If you look at the percentages of fees, that takes you from a $660,000 fee up to a $1 million fee. They erred on the low side, as we typically see. Framingham was advertised at 40 to 50 million, and if you do the math on that, it's right at $750,000, to your point. They ended up at a $98 million brand new school. If you did the math on that, it would be a $1.4 million fee. So historic data is important. The MSBA is very transparent, and it's all based on estimated construction costs. And as designers, we look at that when we go after projects and look at the request for services. And so to say that the numbers are bucketed and typically in that amount, that's because in the past few years, the range of construction costs have been lower than the actual estimated construction cost. And we, at a $68 million coming out of the Feingold Alexander report, that would be $1 million fee.
You will need to wrap up, please.
Okay. And at the $90 million, it would be 1.35, and then you assume some contingency and testing on top of that. As an architect who's been designing public schools in Massachusetts, I think it's a fair and reasonable request.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Microphone number 4.
Christian Kruger, 85 Alcott Road.
Mr. Kruger.
I have a question, well, I have two questions. One is in regards to the big scary mountain of debt slide. Could we please get that displayed?
Certainly. Mr. Swain, you want to come back up here?
So based on what the superintendent said, it sounds as if there's going to be a large amount of money spent to either salvage what remains of the building and allow students to still work in it, or create a new building. And question one is, how much of that big scary mountain of debt is still going to show up even if we don't do anything with the middle school in terms of making a new building? And question two would be, if we do end up actually reducing the amount. Generally, when you reduce funding, you've got like this, three-axis thing where you've got, fast projects that are well done, but they're expensive. You've got slow projects that are well done, but they're cheap. And then you've got the other ones. And what I'm wondering is it going to be, much slower and still the same quality? Is it going to, take more time and thus run into the mountain of debt anyway? Where is the thing that we're going to be seeing reduced by reducing the funding?
Okay, Mr. Swain, I think I called you up here prematurely. I think that's actually a question for the superintendent, first off. And if you've got something else to say, we'll hear from you.
Indeed, when we look at the infrastructure costs that have been projected to us, we're looking at millions and millions of dollars. And so that was the step back that the school committee did to really investigate what was thoughtful, well-spent money. So we were up to even renovate Sanborn was almost, on par with the new school, within millions of dollars of projects that needed to be accomplished. Our fear, on top of the infrastructure, is we can't control the timing then. So even this school year alone, we have had septic issues, we have had boiler issues, we have had minor asbestos abatement to do that we've contained. Minor and contained and managed, but there are just an exponential number of risk factors. So to lose the ability to control the timing and the planning and the operational way we could do this thoughtfully together seems to be the most important component for us.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Kruger?
Well, I'm still wondering if we did end up reducing the funding, where would we see that pulled from? In terms of speed, quality, what would end up taking the hit?
Our concern is potentially both. We have talked with a good range of project managers and other school districts. We aren't not even sure who will bid on the 750 because they need to be sure that they're going to be viable for the longer term project and if they're going to lose money in that early piece. So I think it's either we may not have enough interest, or it could be that we get a partial bid and we do a piece of it and then we get stalemated and have to come back and ask for money for completion, which seems to delay the process and ultimately cost us money for that reason.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to go over here to this microphone, and then we're going to go to the con microphone.
Holly Kratzley, 10 Edmonds Road. I have a 50-year-old son who went to Sanborn, and it wasn't new then, and it wasn't perfect then. And I am really, really getting upset by the postponement of doing something for the middle schools. We have done every other school in this town. We have done additions to the high school at great expense and then knocked it down and built a new one, all the time leaving Sanborn and Peabody in very bad shape. If you look at the handout from the Finance Committee, they list all the borrowing authorizations approved by town meeting since 1992. The last one for the middle school was in 2003. I think it's time, and I don't think we should nickel and dime the school committee on getting this job done, and I'm opposed to cutting, I'm opposed to this amendment, and I think we should stick with the full amount that they think they need because they have researched this. They've already paid a consultant to figure this out. And I think we need to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Con microphone here. That's enough, folks. We really are not going to do that. Okay, thank you. Microphone con there.
David Allen, 316 East
Mr.
Ridge
Allen.
Road. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I think we probably all agree our objective here is to get the best price for the properly configured school. With due respect, I think it's pretty clear that both FinCom and the school committee have done research. We've seen it in detail here, and we've heard just from this mic a lot more come out. I think we don't want to micromanage as a town meeting legislative body year to year what our school committee does. I think we want to empower them to get this right. The $1.5 million isn't what they're supposed to spend. $1.5 million is just the max that they can spend. While there may not be terrific competition amongst architectural firms out there, there is competition, and we've even seen from Mr. Swain's numbers that there's clearly competition when the numbers come in the way they do. Our school committee, I'm satisfied to say, is not going to go out and do something silly and spend it because they happen to be authorized. They'll bring it in at a lower number if they can do that. I think it's pretty clear to get that proper building at the best cost. We want to say thank you, no, to this amendment, and empower our school committee to take the next step here that they have worked on quite hard over years now. As the speaker before me said, it's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Pro microphone here.
Philip Swain, 114 Pine Hill Lane. And,
Mr. Swain.
just responding to the lady who made the comments.
That was Ms. Kratzley.
Ms. Kratzley. So first of all, this proposal does allow the schools to move forward with the study. And we FinCom agree that should happen. But as far as investing in the schools, throughout that list of borrowing that we included in our FinCom, there are additional capital projects that we invested into the middle school since 2003. Most recently, a major capital project where we spent $1 million on new boilers for both new middle schools. And I will just say, I'm sorry I have to say this, but we were told 3 years ago when we did that, if we invested in those new boilers, the schools would be good for another 30 years. So, and before that, we were told when we agreed to build a new high school that we didn't expect any significant capital projects at the middle school in the near future. Now, I realize that's been re-reviewed by our school committee, and I commended them because they're doing a great job with the budget. But all we're saying is we shouldn't be overpaying here. And we should take our time with this project, but we should keep going forward.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Tim Rose, 97 Bartlett Hill Road.
Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. May we have an answer to the question or the assertion by Mr. Swain that if the MSBA does approve it, they have to redo the whole feasibility study?
Superintendent Hunter.
So in talking with MSBA, you must work under their umbrella, so you do have to rebid the process. If we had any faith that we were going to be welcomed and invited in, we've now been declined twice, and the response we get every time is that it's all about the pool of applicants that are in there with you, and they're validating the condition and the need at the schools, but we're always going to be competing against the other districts and the other communities that are in just as much need and greater. And so if we had any faith that the third time was going to work, we would not be standing here. We waited a year ago to try for the second round before we brought this forward. We don't feel like that's a likely possibility. So we do not feel like this will turn into wasted money. We would not be here if we thought that was going to be the case.
Thank you. Pro microphone here.
Bob Andrews, Staffordshire Lane. I want to call the previous question.
Okay, that is a non-debatable motion. Do we have and it requires 2/3 vote. Do we have a second? Yeah, I see that we do. We will proceed to vote on whether we should proceed to a vote on the amendment. We're not voting on the article now, we're voting on the amendment. All those in favor of proceeding to a vote on Mr. Swain's amendment? All those opposed? That carries by well more than 2/3. We'll now proceed to a vote on the amendment. I'll remind everyone that we need a majority vote on this article on this amendment for it to pass, notwithstanding the fact that the article itself requires a 2/3 vote.
One question, though.
Do you have a point of order?
I need a clarification with regards to the language of the motion itself, which is but before we were debating.
I think that you're too late, because what the motion that's on the screen is to reduce the amount appropriated under the article from 1.5 million to 750,000. That's what the motion is. Motion is to amend the article in that way. Okay, we're now proceeding to a vote. All those in favor of Mr. Swain's amendment, please raise your ballots. All those opposed? Okay, I see that the amendment fails, and I do so declare. We will now return to a discussion of the article itself. I see Mr. Hubbard Nelson rising. I believe Mr. Hubbard Nelson has an amendment.
Madam Moderator, I'm Brad Hubbard Nelson from 221 Neshawtuck Road.
Mr. Hubbard Nelson.
I'd like to propose an amendment.
Okay, could we have you should have Mr. Hubbard Nelson's amendment in there. There it is. Thank you very much.
Can I speak from the front?
You sure may. Come on up. Do we have a second for Mr. Hubbard Nelson's amendment? I see that we do. And once again, the amendment will require a majority vote, even though the article itself requires a 2/3.
So the text of our amendment is on the screen. It is to, it is to suggest that the design that is studied in the feasibility study is consistent with Concord's sustainability principles and with the Concord sustainability goals, energy goals, voted at town meeting 2 years ago. And that requires, it suggests an all-electric design without fossil fuels, and a building that is net zero capable. I'll explain that. And in order to do that, we ask that the design consultants have the proper capabilities to do that design. I want to say that I'm entirely in favor of this building project because the middle school is a very compromised situation. And I appreciate the fact that the school committee intends to do this according to Concord's sustainability principles. Can you go to the next slide? Those include reducing dependence on fossil fuels and meeting human needs fairly and efficiently. But the climate mitigation goals are what we committed to reducing emissions by 80% in the next 30 years. Next slide, please. Now, the new middle school should last for several decades. And at the end of last year, the IPC said that warns of dire consequences to the planet if we don't reduce GHG emissions dramatically in the next 12 years. And we believe that Concord should be a leader here, and that it is possible to do this right. This gives us a unique opportunity. Next slide. So Concord is proceeding to do three things. One is to go to all carbon-free electricity. We own our own light plant, so we sell electricity to ourselves, and as of last year, we're 50% carbon-free. So this gives us an opportunity. In doing that, we can transition from fossil fuels to all-electric designs, both for vehicles and for heating. And heating is what we're talking about mainly here. And also invest in efficiency and conservation measures. What this means to me is designing a school that is state-of-the-art, and we're going to find out from the feasibility study what that implies in terms of building cost, but it will ought to lead to lower operating cost. And next slide, please. So an all-electric design using something like geothermal or air source heat pumps would result in zero fossil fuels on site, and which is a benefit to health and safety and comfort within the building. Now, we also talk about net zero energy, which means the opportunity to generate that amount of electricity from solar panels on rooftops or canopies. And we would like the design that is studied to be to have that capability at the start, even if it's not all in place. Next slide, please. So this is a commitment that we made 2 years ago, and it's a challenge, but we intend to we want to specify it now. The school committee has very good intentions on sustainability for the school, but these are the kinds of things that often gets dropped from a project very early on in a stage of value engineering where they say, oh, that must be too expensive, or we would like this to be studied as a preferred design.
Mr. Hubbard Netzlin, are you just about ready to wrap it up?
Oh, we're past this, okay. I didn't see that. Anyway, I'm done.
That was the right answer. And for those of you who are wondering why Mr. Hubbard Nelson ran quite so badly into the red, it was because there was a failure of communication between myself and the clock people on how much time he had to begin with. So thank you very much. We have a second on this motion, and we will now turn our discussion on the floor up. You guys want to talk about it? Come on up. That's right. I told you you could. There you go.
Bring it down now. We will be very quick, I promise. Heather Bout, 33 Alden Road. I just wanted to share the school committee's take on this quickly. Overall, the school committee has no objections to this amendment. We fully support Concord's sustainability principles. We do want to make sure that in the long run process, we're respecting the authority of the eventual building committee to look into all of these things. But we are fully on board with sustainability principles. And I'll let Lori tell you a little more.
Just a couple of high notes we want to make. So obviously we are committed to the goals and principles, but we do want to just take a minute to highlight a couple of pieces because it's so early in the process. We would certainly commit to reviewing options for zero net and all electric energy, hiring designers with the background. One piece we do want to say out loud is that we don't have any idea how much this costs. So that's going to need to be a short and a long-term consideration, knowing that that's a priority of the community. The building committee will need to maintain that priority while they weigh the overall cost. The building committee, the select board's looking at a draft that's already identified a professional with sustainability in their background. We want to be sure we're remaining current because these technologies change so quickly that we're maintaining what is best practice. And finally, we want to be sure that it aligns with our educational programming because there may be certain components of a program that we want to make sure those energy choices will best fit. So we're just reinforcing our commitment, but wanted to make sure we put out a few unknowns so that it was factored in. Again, there's no objection to the amendment.
Thank you very much. We'll now open the floor to questions and comments on the proposed amendment. Pro microphone.
Madam Moderator, Bob Lawson, 90 Lee Drive.
Mr. Lawson.
First, I have a question. At the beginning of the meeting, your stipulation about no personal attacks or remarks, does that apply just to people in this room or does that apply to everybody?
I would say that probably it applies to everybody in order to stay within the spirit of our meeting.
I can do that.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
All right, then. Well, then, I'll phrase it this way. Everybody in this room, I think, is aware that our president brought us out of the Paris Climate Accords. We're the only country in the world that is not a part of that. The only thing that's not devastating about that is that other parts of our society are picking up the slack, from states to municipalities to towns to corporations. And here's an opportunity for our town to do that. Because when we're the only country in the world, we got to be doing something wrong there. So let's make it right here in Concord. I think this is an excellent amendment. In a couple of months, I'm going to become a grandfather, and my granddaughter will be born here in Concord. In May, she'll be Concord's youngest citizen. And she'll probably go to this school, I hope. And when she's my age, no matter what education she got at that school or at the Concord High School or beyond, it's not going to do her much good when she's my age, and all the experts tell us that civilization and our planet are going to be coming apart at the seams later in this century. So with all the wonderful things we do here in Concord, and I'm a strong supporter of all of them, let's go with Brad's amendment here, because let's have a world that they can then graduate from our schools and all our fine facilities and live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Over there.
Sylvia Lotspeech Green, 121 Holdenwood Road.
Ms. Green?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I strongly support this amendment. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to join our neighboring towns, Lexington, Lincoln, and several other communities that either are planning net zero schools or have built them. And I spent Saturday at a conference of a wonderful climate activist group called Mothers Out Front in Cambridge, in a very beautiful middle school, the Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School. Some of you may have been there. This school is a LEED certified school. It's not technically a net zero school until the summer months, and then it's net zero because the solar panels are supplying all the electricity. It's a school that has so many beautiful features that are educational. So that the rooftop garden, the heat pump system, all is explained to the students and any visitors to the building. And middle schools, the age of a middle school human being, even though kids that age, can drive us crazy, it's an age where one develops either hope about the future or despair. And
Thank you very much. And we'll move on to microphone number 4.
Chris McKinney, 293 Haywood Mill.
Mr. McKinney?
Madam Moderator, I was listening to the superintendent's response, and this may be a question for town council. If this amendment passes and the cost becomes prohibitive, and the ultimate motion passes, and we decide in the design process that we just can't afford it, will we have to re-vote for this middle school to be built if we choose economically not to include this this proposed amendment?
We'll hear from town council.
Madam Moderator, 2 answers to that. First, the vote to build the middle school, as I believe the superintendent mentioned earlier, would have to come back to town meeting anyway. This vote is not for construction, it's for design, it's feasibility and schematic design. So there will be other votes anyway. And those issues could be taken up then. Second, the way that this amendment has been structured, it is in the nature of, and more advisory than binding. You'll see that it says that it's urging the school committee to take certain actions. It says should rather than shall on the hiring. So my perspective is that you would not need to come back in order to fit within the scope. Again, for feasibility and schematic design, construction is a later question.
So argumentatively, the design could come back without a net zero design.
The design could, at that point, town meeting would have to decide whether it wants to move forward with construction on a building that doesn't have those features.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Macarius. Microphone number 3. That's you.
Oh, Joan Gagan, 275 Holdenwood Road. I'd like to call the question.
I have a question.
Well, let's see. We've only been discussing this. I know that it's late. We haven't gotten to the article yet, but we've only been discussing this amendment for about 14 minutes. So why don't you come back with that motion in just a minute, and we'll go to this person at the pro microphone who's been waiting very patiently. Go ahead.
Janet Miller, 1647 Main Street.
Ms. Miller.
I'm the chair of the Comprehensive Sustainability Energy Committee, CSAC, speaking on behalf of the committee. CSAC is charged with assisting the town in identifying, designing, and implementing programs and projects of fostering energy conservation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy generation. Buildings are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, so it's essential that we take advantage of every opportunity to construct zero net energy buildings if we are to meet the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. Zero net energy buildings can be achieved with the use of ground source or air source heat pumps, which are energy efficient and whose running costs are comparable to gas heat. These buildings can be designed for the installation of solar panels at a later date, which will make the buildings truly net zero net energy. The cost of energy consumption in schools is substantial. We estimate the cost of the middle schools of over $230,000 per year, with annual emissions of approximately 1.3 tons of carbon dioxide per student. We've shown that by building an energy-efficient school, we can cut emissions dramatically. The new high school has halved the CO2 emissions per student, while lowering the annual bill of energy consumption by $200,000 a year. We can completely eliminate greenhouse gas emissions in a new middle school that does not use fossil fuels as a source of heat.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Yanis Tsitsas, 33 Brook Trail Road, Concord,
sir.
Mass. Madam Moderator, since we don't have an actual figure, if we're going to accept and pass this amendment for a Z&E building design, and we don't know if it's going to cost, what a percentage more is going to cost than the actual building, and since the feasibility study is a percentage, as the previous people stated, of 1.445% of the building cost, by accepting this amendment or by voting yes, do we accept that the cost of the final construction of the high school will be over $90 million, and what percentage? So in other words, by agreeing to this, do we agree to a much higher cost of the construction?
I think we've had that question answered already by town council, who let us know that the building project itself will come back to town meeting. Town meeting is not making any decisions right now about what sort of school will be constructed or how much it will cost. That's going to come back to us. Are you asking whether the feasibility study itself will cost more money? All right, we'll ask for the superintendent to come and give us that answer if she's able.
Not only that, but how much more? If the gentleman who brought the amendment can tell us.
Yeah, I don't think we have the answers. If I'm understanding your question correctly, we are going to put out to bid for a feasibility study and schematic design for the building within the scope of what we know at the moment. And then they're going to bring us back the schematic design that we can then all judge and make decisions about. So anything we do today is only to help us to create what we're hoping for down the road, and that's going to be a vision we create over the next 12 to 18 months. So costs right now are very soft. We need the 1.5 million. We know definitively we're within the 1.5 to be able to better determine the costs we want to bring to you in 12 to 18 months.
Thank you. Con microphone.
I call the question again, please.
All right. Okay. So this is non-debatable. I need a second. I see that I have one. Requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of calling the question? Thank you very much. All those opposed? I see that that motion passes, and we will proceed now to vote on the amendment. This amendment requires a majority to pass. All those in favor of the amendment that you see on the screen? Thank you very much. All those opposed? And I see that the amendment overwhelmingly passes. And we will now move back to the article itself. And I will ask whether there are any additional comments or questions about Article 14 as it has been amended. Microphone number 3.
Lisa McKinney, 293 Haywood Mill Road.
Ms.
I'd like
McKinney.
to suggest, thank you. I'd like to suggest strongly that when the feasibility study gets put out, that they entertain using the model school designs. Whether or not we receive MSBA funding, it's already been established that the system of the model school has built-in inherent cost savings benefits, both in terms of caps of fees, costs, and expenses, and that it might be an excellent means by which the design could be accomplished, taking into account we have, as a result of the amendment, other costs that might be a factor. So that if we get permission to submit to the MSBA, we have a design that would meet their criteria, and if we don't, we've got a cost-saving design that comes back to the taxpayers, at least bearing in mind the enormity of the expense following the funding of the high school. In considering that the Thoreau School and the Alcott School were about less than half of the Willard School. I think if I'm remembering right, Willard was 27 million and Thoreau and Alcott maybe between 12 and 14 apiece. It seems to me that the debt that we're carrying is extraordinary if we don't consider as many cost-saving means of doing so. And I would like to propose that we do this along the lines of the model school. I had a motion to amend myself, asking that the schematic design include in the one or more options the model school concepts and designs programs, and that we consider using a model school design type architect. But it was suggested it might be out of order, trying to do more than suggest to the town that we consider those model schools. And I would encourage the school committee and the town to be conscientious of those designs out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pro microphone.
Charlie Blair, 26 Florio Drive.
Mr. Blair.
It's very interesting. I was on a school committee once, and way back when, and we decided that we would have the plan of all plans called the master plan. And in that master plan, and you can all go to the library, and it's someplace tucked away in the corner someplace, you can look it up. And as Mrs. Kratsley mentioned, the first school to be built before we built Alcott or any of these schools was the middle school. And here we are finally building it at the end of the program when we were going to build it first. I just had one more comment. I do agree with the lady that just spoke, and I had brought this up at the hearing too for the superintendent, that I would like to see if the superintendent include a model school when they go back to MSBA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker at the pro microphone.
Yes, Edie Lipinski, 133 Nurse Neck Hill Road.
Ms. Lipinski.
I'm speaking for the League of Women Voters of Concord Carlisle. The League recommends a yes vote on this article. We recognize the importance of studying the feasibility and design of a new middle school. We urge the building committee that will be charged to oversee this study to keep cost savings a top priority as they consider the alternatives for the project. We also strongly recommend that the building committee fully embrace input from the community in their decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker at the pro microphone.
Christian Kruger, 85 Alcott Road.
Mr. Kruger.
I'm going to be quick because I want you to vote for this. So the way I see it, these are costs that are going to end up being spent anyway. We're either going to really quickly need to put a plan into place when the gym ceiling eventually falls in, or we're going to have things just slowly accumulate over time until it absolutely definitely is going to be cheaper to build a new middle school. I was in that place a decade ago, and it was falling apart then. I'm pretty sure it's haunted. So I really think we ought to get going on making a new middle school, and I'm glad to see that we're finally getting around to it. Please vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Kruger. Next speaker at the pro microphone.
Dawn Guariello, 57 Bristers Hill Road.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I have 2 points to make. I want to be quick as well. One, I think the school committee has done a fabulous job doing their homework and their research regarding this, and I think they're very well informed and have done a great job educating those who have come out to their sessions. So I just wanted to say that as a designer, they're very well informed. Typically, my clients are not that well informed. They are not my client, but I'm just saying that I work with a lot of school committees, and I just want to say that. My second point is to the model school question or comment. Yes, model schools can be cheaper. Here's the caveat. You have to buy the plan that it is established. There are certain firms with certain plans, you have to buy that exact plan. The second you change it, you get charged. You get charged from the designer, you get added cost on the project. So if you're willing to just go out and buy Bancroft School in Andover, as an example, it's an elementary school, you wouldn't buy that one. But as an example, you would have to buy it as it is. I can tell you that none of them are net zero energy ready, and that's a factor that we just voted on. So it's worth noting that that's a great program if a town just wants to go select off a menu a set of plans. There's only certain designers that do it, and if it gets put into the RFS, there will be designers that will choose not to pursue the project, because if it gets to the end of schematic and it goes towards a model school, that designer does not get the full contract, and it goes to the plan that they select. So just for reference, so everyone knows, that's how the model school process works.
Thank you very much. Did we have another speaker there at the pro microphone? Yes.
Yes, I'm back. Edie Lipinski, 133 Nurstack Hill.
Ms.
This time I'm speaking for myself. Just one other item that we didn't talk about today, this evening, was the value of the Beede School property that will revert to the town if we build one school at Sanborn site. I believe it's several $1 million, so that is a very valuable piece of property that will revert to the town.
Thank you very much. Microphone over there.
Chris Price, 113 Neshoba Road.
Ms. Price.
I'd like to call the question.
You know, as it turns out, there's nobody at a microphone. I think we're actually ready for a vote anyway. Okay, so this article requires a 2/3 vote for passage. I already have a second, I think, don't I? I have a second. Yeah, I already have. Thank you, Ruth. I've already got a second. Okay, so we'll now move on to a vote under Article 14 as amended. Thank you very much. And it requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of Article 14 as amended? Thank you very much. All those opposed? I see that the motion carries by an overwhelming margin, over 2/3, and we'll adjourn until tomorrow. I want to remind everybody that we have pre-scheduled Articles 23 through 26 tomorrow night. We are going to start with those, and then we will return to the school articles that we passed over tonight. Thank you, everybody.